I'm Madison Harrington. My sister signed emails with my name and called my fiancé's job to add herself to his insurance. My sister Madison had been plotting this identity theft since the day Ethan proposed to me. She had watched from the restaurant window as he dropped down on one knee at our anniversary meal, her face plastered against the glass like a stalker in a horrible film. She had already begun her campaign by the time we arrived home to spread the news. "I just think it's funny that Avery gets engaged right when I'm up for promotion," she informed our mother. "Obviously she is attempting to steal my thunder." She was up for a promotion to shift supervisor at the accounting business where she worked data entry. But, in Madison's perspective, everything was a competition that she was bound to win. Madison started wearing a ring to work 4 days after we were engaged. Not just any ring, but my real engagement ring, which she would remove from my jewelry box every morning after I departed for my hospital shifts. She has a wonderful understanding of my timetable. I departed at 5:45 a.m. for rounds. She departed for her office at 9 a.m., 3 hours to be me. Her coworker Melissa was the first to notice. "Oh my God, is that an engagement ring?" Madison reached out her hand. My hand. "Really? I'm showing off my 2.25-carat cushion-cut diamond." Ethan eventually proposed. "We've kept it hidden since his family is so discreet. Old money, you know, owns hotels." Ethan's family owned only one business, his uncle's pizza restaurant. But Madison had created a complete mythology about my fiancé. She had stolen our engagement images from my phone while I was sleeping and cut them out, substituting my face with hers using an app. She presented them to everyone at her office. She would lie and say that this is us in Aspen. We're at his family's Hamptons mansion. The Aspen shot was taken on our camping trip to Big Bear. The estate was Ethan's parents' backyard in Riverside. Within 10 days, Madison had informed her whole staff of her wedding preparations. She was having it at the Ritz-Carlton. She was flying flowers from Holland. Her clothing was being fashioned by someone who had previously worked with royalty. She had acquired all of this information from the wedding magazines I'd purchased, where I'd marked financial alternatives and wrote "maybe someday" in the margins. Every evening she'd put my ring back in my jewelry box before I arrived home. I had no suspicions until Melissa contacted our house and asked Madison to check catering options. When I responded, she remarked, "Oh, Mrs. is soon to be Harrington. Your voice sounds different." I informed her that she had the wrong number. "No," Melissa protested. "Madison provided me this number for wedding-related emergencies. She'll marry Ethan Harrington next spring. I am her maid of honor." I hung up assuming it was a hoax until our cousin Carmen phoned. "Hi, I just saw Madison's announcement in her corporate newsletter. It's strange that you both got engaged to people called Ethan at the same time. What are the odds?" That night I addressed Madison. She was seated at the vanity, trying on my bridal earrings, which I had purchased to match the ring. "Those aren't yours?" I inquired. Madison did not even flinch. "Besides, you can't prove they're yours. There's no receipt, no evidence, just your word against mine." I reached for them, but she'd already locked them in her jewelry box, which had a combination only she knew. The following day she escalated. She took Ethan's photo to work, the one from my nightstand, and placed it on her desk. She began signing emails as Madison Harrington. She even contacted Ethan's office, pretending to be me, and inquired about adding her name to his insurance as his fiancée. Ethan's supervisor was perplexed, so he phoned him personally. "Why is this woman claiming to be your fiancée? Her name is Madison something." Ethan phoned me immediately. "Your sister is insane. She's telling folks that we're engaged. I know I'm managing it, but I wasn't before. I didn't know how." Madison told our mother that it was all a misunderstanding, that her co-workers had mistakenly believed she was engaged, and that she had not corrected them. Mom told me I was being dramatic, and that sisters share everything. Madison's breaking point came when she arranged an appointment at Tiffany's to have the ring cleaned. She snatched my ring that morning. She invited Melissa and 2 other co-workers to watch her get her engagement ring serviced. Graham, Tiffany's associate, was all grins. "What a gorgeous ring. Is this for cleaning?" Madison purred. "Yes, my fiancé purchased it here 6 weeks ago. We are getting married at the Ritz." Graham's face changed slightly. "Oh, it's one of ours. Let me check our system." He scanned the ring with a specialized gadget for authentication. His screen flashed up with information. Madison leaned over the countertop. "Is everything okay? It's a really precious item. I want to ensure that it is appropriately recorded." Graham nodded slowly. "Of course. Can I view the warranty card? It should have been in the blue box when bought." Madison laughed uncomfortably. The ring had not even been purchased from this retailer. The system found no records matching the ring's serial number to any Ethan Harrington. Graham walked back from the counter and pointed to his manager's office. Madison's expression changed from confident to pallid in seconds. She attempted to laugh it off, but her voice sounded wobbly and incorrect. Melissa leaned forwards and caressed Madison's arm. "Is everything okay? You seem quite pale." Graham maintained his professional demeanor, but his eyes had altered. He sensed something was wrong. The manager emerged from the back office, a woman in her 50s with keen eyes and impeccable posture. Graham handed her his screen, and they chatted quietly as Madison stood still. Her two co-workers shuffled uneasily, looking at each other with perplexed faces. The manager approached the counter and smiled at Madison, but it was not a kind grin. "We need to confirm certain details about this purchase. Do you have your original receipt or warranty documentation?" Madison's hands began trembling. "I don't bring them around with me. It's at home in a secure location." The manager nodded slowly. "Of course. And when precisely did your fiancé get this ring?" 6 weeks prior, just before he proposed. "Which place did he buy it from?" Madison paused for just a second too long. "This is the one. This place." The manager looked at Graham, who shook his head slightly. "According to our data, no purchases that match the characteristics of this ring have occurred in the last 8 months. Madison's face flushed hot. Perhaps that was a different Tiffany's. He travels much for work. Melissa's phone rang, so she moved aside to answer it. Madison watched her leave with panicked eyes. The manager kept a calm, professional manner. "I understand. However, before we can service this piece, we must first talk with the original purchaser to verify ownership. Company policy on high-value products." Madison took the ring off the counter. "You know what? I'll just move it somewhere else. But this is ludicrous." Graham shifted slightly, blocking her passage to the door. "Ma'am, we need to finish our authentication procedure first." Madison raised her voice an octave. "You cannot keep me here. I have the right to depart." The manager raised her hand. "Of course you do. But we also have a responsibility to ensure that the products brought to us for service are not stolen. I am sure you understand." Melissa returned inside, perplexed and concerned. She walked directly to Madison. "That was your sister Avery, on the phone. She claims she's on her way here and you're wearing her engagement ring." The other two co-workers gasped. Madison's lips opened and closed, but no words emerged. Melissa continued, her voice becoming stronger. "She said Ethan proposed to her, not you. She has both the receipt and the original packaging." Madison attempted to grip Melissa's arm. "She is lying. She's envious because I got engaged first." Melissa backed away. "But you told us Ethan proposed to you 6 weeks ago. Avery said he proposed to her 10 weeks ago. Your chronology doesn't make any sense." The manager walked forward. "Perhaps we should all wait for Avery to arrive and have this resolved properly." Madison gazed toward the door, as if she was about to rush away. Graham had placed himself between her and the exit. Except for the classical music playing through concealed speakers, the store felt quite modest and silent. Madison's respiration became quicker and shallower. She continued gazing at her co-workers, who were staring at her with emotions ranging from surprise to outright dread. 25 minutes seemed like 25 hours. I stormed through Tiffany's door, holding my handbag loaded with evidence. The blue Tiffany box, a receipt with Ethan's signature, and a date dated 10 weeks ago. My phone has the original, unedited engagement images of me wearing the ring. Madison was seated on a chair near the counter, appearing as if she was about to throw up. Her co-workers formed a crowd at the window. The manager greeted me with a professional grin. "Are you Avery?" I nodded and took out my receipt. "This is my ring. My fiancé, Ethan, bought it here 9 weeks ago. I have all of the documents." Graham collected my receipt and scanned it into his system. His face cleared up instantly. "Yes, this fits our records exactly. Purchase date, ring specs, everything." He gazed at Madison with barely contained disdain. The manager inspected both my blue box and the images on my phone. She matched Madison's ring to images of me wearing it in the restaurant when the proposal. Madison tried one more time. She let me borrow it for a few photographs. We were just messing around. Melissa cut her off abruptly. "That makes no sense, Madison. You have been telling us for weeks that you are engaged to Ethan. You showed us the wedding locations. You've asked me to be your maid of honor. You can't claim you were only borrowing a ring for pictures." The other two co-workers nodded in accord. One of them seems close to tears. "I cannot believe you lied to us about everything." The manager's voice remained calm yet forceful. "Ma'am, I'll require you to return the ring to its proper owner immediately. If you refuse, I will have no choice but to notify security and the police." Madison's hand trembled as she removed the ring off her finger. She clutched it for a moment, as if she couldn't bear to let go. Then she virtually hurled it at me. Okay. Take your silly ring. This whole issue has been blown out of proportion. I retrieved the ring and placed it back on my finger where it belonged. The manager turned to me. I apologize for the issue. We take authentication extremely seriously, and I'm delighted we could help to fix this. Madison sprang up so quickly that her chair scraped noisily against the floor. Her co-workers backed away from her. Melissa's expression was a mix of anger and embarrassment. I trusted you. We all trusted you. You made us appear like idiots. Madison's eyes welled up with tears, but they appeared to be furious rather than sad. Whatever. You all are overreacting. She attempted to push by Graham, but he did not move. The manager spoke again. Before you depart, I need to capture the event for our records. Madison finally appeared to understand how much danger she was in. She spoke in a flat monotone while the manager took notes. Her co-workers departed first, going away without saying goodbye to her. Melissa hesitated at the door and looked back at me. I'm so sorry. If I had known. I shake my head. It is not your fault. She is adept at lying. Madison attempted to escape after Melissa, but I stopped her. We're not finished. You snatched my ring. You claimed to be engaged to my fiancé. You lied to innocent people. Madison's face twisted. You always receive everything. Perfect Avery, with her perfect life and engagement. I deserve to be happy too. The manager cleared her throat. Maybe you should take this conversation somewhere. I nodded and stepped aside, allowing Madison to exit. She almost raced out of the store. I remained there for a time, just breathing and staring at my ring, which had returned to its proper place on my finger. Graham approached me silently. For what it's worth, I am sorry you had to go through that. The most difficult issues are always family-related. I thanked him and exited the store. Outside in the parking lot I sat in my car and called Ethan. He responded on the first ring. Did you receive the ring back? I did. It is over. But his tone turned serious. Avery, this is not over. Your sister needs assistance, and your family should quit enabling her. He was correct. I drove directly to Madison's office building. When I wanted to speak with a human resources representative regarding employee conduct, the receptionist seemed taken by surprise. She called, and 7 minutes later, a woman in her 40s arrived. I am Brooke Sullivan from HR. How can I assist you? I recounted the entire thing in the private meeting room she directed me to. Identity theft, a stolen ring, falsehoods to co-workers, and a forged engagement. Brooke made notes on a legal pad, her demeanor becoming more serious with each detail. She requested copies of my proof, so I submitted everything to her email immediately away. Melissa provided photos, receipts, a timetable, and witness accounts. Brooke thoroughly studied everything. This is definitely odd. While this is essentially a personal family dispute, your sister used corporate time and resources to spread misleading information. She used co-workers as unknowing partners in her deceit. That deviates into workplace conduct area. I felt relief sweep over me. Finally, someone in authority was taking this seriously, rather than simply encouraging me to forgive and forget since it was family. Brooke kept going. We'll need to conduct an internal investigation. I'll be speaking with the co-workers who are involved and reviewing any company communications where your sister may have misrepresented herself. This could take a few days. I gave her a smile. Thank you for listening. I understand this sounds ridiculous. She offered me a kind gaze. Unfortunately, job malfeasance takes many forms. This incident definitely caused harm to many people and fostered a hostile environment based on lies. We take it seriously here. I left the workplace feeling as if things were finally going in the right way. That afternoon, Ethan and I met in the office of his boss, Vincent. Vincent was a tall guy with gentle eyes who had always been nice to Ethan. He listened to our account of Madison's attempted phone call to add herself to Ethan's insurance. As we chatted, his eyebrows rose higher and higher. I felt the phone call was weird, but I wasn't sure how to handle it. The woman claimed to be your fiancé, Avery, but something about the talk felt odd. Ethan revealed that it was his future sister-in-law pretending to be his fiancé. Vincent shook his head, disbelieving. That is an example of identity fraud. If you want a formal statement on that call for any investigations, I am delighted to supply one. We thanked him and departed. Sloane arrived at my place that evening, bringing pizza and wine. She had been my buddy since nursing school and was more familiar with my family problems than anybody else. She listened to the entire Tiffany story with her mouth hanging wide. Your sister is crazy. This is not typical sibling rivalry. This is deliberate identity theft. We arranged all of my evidence on the dining room table and made a thorough chronology. On day 0, Ethan proposed. Day 4, Madison began wearing my ring to work. She exhibited the false images in week 2. Week 3, she contacted Ethan's workplace. In week 4, everything exploded at Tiffany's. Sloan documented every witness, piece of evidence, theft, and impersonation. She compiled it all into a paper that appeared professional and detailed. This demonstrates a definite increase. She began small and gradually increased her risk tolerance. I felt ill looking over the timeline. My sister had been steadily taking my identity for about a month. The next morning, while I was getting ready for my hospital shift, someone hammered on my front door. I peered through the peephole and saw Madison standing there, looking anxious. I opened the door, but did not welcome her inside. She pushed past me anyhow. "You must call my office. You have to explain that everything was a misunderstanding." I crossed my arms. "No." Madison's voice became louder and more frantic. "Brooke has planned a formal meeting with me for this afternoon. I know you talked to HR. You are attempting to get me fired." I remained cool despite the fact that my heart was racing. "I am not trying to get you fired. I reported what you did because it was wrong and affected your coworkers. You created the situation." Madison began weeping, but these were furious tears. "You always do this. You're always making me seem horrible. You always have to be the victim." I reflected on all the years of this pattern. Madison competes with me on everything. Madison manipulates things to make herself the hero, and me the evil. Madison was able to get away with behavior that would have gotten anyone else in severe trouble because her mother constantly made excuses for her. "I won't be covering for you anymore. You snatched my ring. You impersonated me. You lied to everybody. Those are the facts, and I am not going to pretend they did not happen." Madison's cheeks turned crimson. "Fine. When I lose my job and am unable to pay my rent, that is your responsibility." She rushed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood there shaking for a few minutes before picking up my keys and heading to work. My job was lengthy and tiring, but at the hospital, I could concentrate on helping others rather than dealing with family issues. My mom phoned 3 hours after my shift finished. I could detect the guarded tone before she finished saying hi. "Madison came over today, weeping about how you're trying to fire her and ruin her life. She claims you've always been envious of her coworkers, and now you're pushing it too far. Sisters must support one another, Avery. Family comes first, no matter how much pride you have." I stopped her before she could start her typical diatribe about how I needed to be the larger person. Madison's mother committed identity theft. She took my engagement ring every morning for 4 weeks. She came up at Tiffany's with my ring and lied to the employees. She contacted Ethan's office pretending to be me and attempted to add herself to his insurance. She impersonated me for dozens of people. "If you don't recognize the gravity of the situation, you're contributing to it." The line became silent. I counted to 10 in my brain before Mom spoke again. "Send me all you've got. All of the evidence you've mentioned." Her voice sounded unsure rather than scornful. "I'd like to see the timeline, receipts, and everything else." I opened my laptop and attached the whole documentation file that Sloan had helped me construct. The purchase receipt from the jewelry retailer. Madison's false engagement images have been screenshotted. Melissa's written statement concerning the Tiffany incident. The email from Vincent verifying the strange insurance call. The timeline depicts how Madison's falsehoods became more serious over the course of 4 weeks. I pressed submit and gazed at my phone for another minute before Mom said she'd call me back after she had examined everything. Brooke phoned me on my cell phone after 3 days. "Avery, this is Brooke Sullivan from Madison's Human Resources Department. I wanted to give you an update on our investigation. We've placed Madison on administrative leave while we investigate the situation." Following the Tiffany's incident, several of Madison's co-workers raised further concerns about occasions in which she exaggerated or distorted aspects about her personal life. "We take this extremely seriously since it reflects on our company's judgment and has produced a hostile work environment based on lying." She hesitated, as if she were selecting her words carefully. "The study should be completed within 10 days. Thank you for giving such detailed documentation. It made our procedure extremely clearer." I thanked her and hung up, feeling uncomfortable. Part of me was glad that someone in authority was taking this matter seriously. Part of me was sickened that my sister's falsehoods had grown so terrible that her own co-workers were reporting them. An hour later, my phone began humming with text messages. "Madison, you are wrecking my career. Everyone at work believes I'm a liar and a scam because of you. You couldn't just give me something nice for once. You have to create everything about yourself and your ideal life. I cannot believe you went to my HR department like a tattletale. We are sisters. We're meant to defend one another. Another communication arrived before I could react. This is a light-hearted joke that you exaggerated, because you are envious because my coworkers adore me and want to celebrate my engagement. You always do this. You're always making me seem horrible. I took screenshots of every message and saved them in my documentation folder. The messages suggested she still didn't grasp what she'd done wrong. In her opinion, taking my name and ring was simply a prank that I had overreacted to. Ethan's parents asked us to supper on Friday. His mom answered the door and instantly drew me into a hug. I have to apologize to you, Avery. When that woman contacted Ethan's office to inquire about insurance, we should have sensed something was off. We knew Madison was competitive with you for years, but we never expected her to go this far. Ethan's father was grilling burgers in the backyard and joked that now everyone knew which sister was joining their family. His mother whacked his arm, yet she was smiling. We spent the evening discussing common topics such as wedding preparations and Ethan's uncle's new pizza oven. It was nice to be with individuals who recognized how serious the situation was, without making me feel theatrical for my distress. Melissa texted me the next morning, asking if I'd like to meet for coffee. She chose a location near her office and was already seated at a corner table when I arrived. I need to express how bad I feel about it all. Several of us at work feel deceived and silly for having believed such intricate falsehoods. She stirred her cappuccino without glancing at me. We all found it weird that Madison never invited us to meet her affluent fiancé or visit his family's alleged mansion. She was continually making excuses for Ethan's hectic schedule and his family's privacy, but we wanted to trust her since she appeared joyful and thrilled. We're outraged with her but also humiliated that we were drawn into her dream world. I assured her it was not her fault. Madison had lied to me our entire lives. She'd become better at it over time. Melissa nodded, saying that most of Madison's co-workers were no longer speaking to her. Those that went to Tiffany's felt particularly foolish for taking part in what turned out to be a theft. Mom phoned me Sunday afternoon. Her voice sounded scratchy, as if she had been weeping. I need to apologize for enabling Madison's actions for so many years. I always made allowances for her because she appeared more frail and needy than you. You were always so capable and independent. I believed Madison needed more help and protection, but now I understand how it just made everything worse. I created an environment in which she believed she could get away with anything, because I would always protect her. Her voice broke as she continued. I'm embarrassed that my daughter felt the need to take her sister's identity because she couldn't be content with her own situation. I'm not sure how to correct this or make things right. I told her I didn't have any answers either. All I knew was that I couldn't keep pretending Madison's conduct was normal and acceptable. Mom said she understood and would back any boundaries I set. Brooke Sullivan phoned me the next Tuesday with the results of the inquiry. Avery, I wanted to let you know that our workplace inquiry has ended. Madison violated several business standards: time, misrepresenting to co-workers, and engaging in unprofessional behavior. She is being terminated immediately and will not be eligible for rehire at our organization. I felt a complex mixture of relief and melancholy rush over me. My sister had recently lost her job because she couldn't stop competing with me, and she'd created a complete phony life instead of being content with her own. Brooke thanked me again for my assistance and stated that they were examining their procedures to avoid such incidents in the future. Mom called 9 days later to inform me that Madison had moved out. She located a tiny apartment across town. I believe she is currently too ashamed to see her family on a daily basis, but she began visiting a therapist, including misusing work. She is addressing her jealousy and low self-esteem issues. I told Mom I was delighted Madison was getting assistance, but I wasn't ready to communicate with her yet. Perhaps not for a long while. I wanted room to comprehend what had transpired and figure out how to proceed. Ethan and I sat on the couch that night, gazing over our calendars. We had planned a wedding for next spring, but it suddenly felt too far away. Too much waiting and anxiety about what Madison may do next. Let's move it up. Let's do a little ceremony with only those who genuinely support us. Ethan clasped my hand and took out his phone to check up locations. Planning our actual wedding without the shadow of Madison's falsehoods was freeing and enjoyable. We were done allowing her turmoil to dictate our pleasure. Sloane greeted me at the bridal store on Saturday morning with 2 coffees and her trademark direct honesty. She strolled right past the ornate dresses with cathedral trains, pointing to a plain A-line dress with lace sleeves. That's the one. It's elegant yet not overly so. Plus, your sister can't take it because she didn't get an invitation. We both chuckled, but I felt a twist in my chest. I never imagined I'd arrange my wedding without Madison present. Growing up, we had always spoken about becoming each other's maid of honor, but that was before she realized my life was more exciting than hers. The sales worker helped me into the dress, and for the first time in months, I could see myself properly in the mirror. Madison did not want to be me, but I was. Sloane dried her eyes and said I looked great. I bought the outfit that day and felt lighter as I walked out the store. Madison didn't contact me for 4 months. Ethan and I concentrated on our minor ceremony arrangements, while Mom remarked that Madison was doing better in treatment. Then, on a Tuesday evening, Mom called and asked if I'd want to meet with Madison's therapist to discuss family issues. The therapist believes it would benefit everyone if we discussed limits and what occurred. I promised Mom I'd go to 2 sessions, but I wasn't promising anything else. The therapy office was in a plain medical facility with beige walls and motivating posters. Mom sat on one side of the room, while Madison sat on the other, appearing smaller than I recalled. Madison had worked hard to understand her behavior patterns, according to the therapist, and she wanted to accept responsibility. Madison took out a folded paper and began reading in a trembling voice. She apologized for taking my identity, ring, and causing me so much misery. Her therapist stepped in to explain that Madison had been diagnosed with narcissistic personality characteristics and was learning healthy techniques to boost her self-esteem. I listened to it all and felt largely numb. When they ended, I informed Madison that I accepted her apologies, but trust does not rebuild in a few months. It takes years of constant altering behavior. I needed room to recover, and she had to respect that. Madison nodded, wiping her face. 5 months later, Ethan and I married in a garden ceremony attended by 45 guests who genuinely cared about us. Mom came and obeyed every rule I made, including not mentioning Madison once. Ethan's uncle supplied pizza from the family eatery. Sloane made a humorous toast about how she knew we'd make it because we had weathered identity theft together. When Ethan and I had our first dance as husband and wife, I understood something very essential. Protecting my peace was not selfish. Refusing to tolerate harmful conduct was not cruel. Sometimes the biggest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to walk away from those who have injured you, even if they are family. The evening concluded with sparklers, laughing, and the realization that I had chosen myself for once. "We took the trip last month," my sister said, and my heart sank. I had no idea they'd used my $5,000 and excluded me from a family vacation. The food court at Riverside Mall smelled like pretzels and teriyaki chicken. I was having lunch between meetings when I noticed my sister perusing a sunglasses booth near the fountain. We hadn't spoken in a few weeks, which wasn't surprising considering our hectic schedules, but I thought I'd say hello and perhaps have a coffee together. "Rachel," I yelled, slipping through the lunch mob. She turned, and her face paled. Actually, pale. Her grin was forced, extending over her teeth as if she had just been caught doing something wrong. "Oh hey," she said, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "What are you doing here?" "Same as everyone else, avoiding real food," I quipped, holding up my depressing desk salad. "Hey, so when's this family trip happening? I've been meaning to ask Mom about the final dates, but you know how she never answers her phone." Rachel's expression altered. The color drained more from her cheeks, and she glanced down at the sunglasses display as if it contained the mysteries of the cosmos. "About that," she began, then paused. Her hands were fidgeting with a pair of aviators. "You really don't know?" My stomach sank. Something about her tone made my skin tingle. "Know what?" Rachel breathed softly and placed down the sunglasses. "We went last month. The trip happened already. I thought I assumed someone told you." The mall noise faded to white static. People strolled past us, laughing and shopping, but I felt as if I were underwater. My mouth opened and then closed. Words wouldn't form correctly. "Last month," I said firmly. "You went last month." "It was complicated," Rachel said hurriedly, her words pouring out. "There was this issue with the cabin availability, and the dates got moved up suddenly, and everyone's schedules were just so hard to coordinate, and I paid $5,000 toward that trip." My voice sounded odd and distant. "I transferred it to Dad's account in April for the rental, the activities, food, everything we discussed at Easter dinner." Rachel's face wrinkled. "I know, I'm so sorry. Dad was supposed to talk to you about it. He said he would handle it." "Handle what exactly?" "Handle stealing my money and excluding me from a family vacation I helped pay for." "It wasn't like that," she protested, but her gaze did not contact mine. "The money thing. Dad said he'd pay you back. And you've just been so busy with work lately. We thought maybe you wouldn't even be able to make it anyway, so you decided for me." My hands trembled. I stuffed them into my pockets. "You all decided I wasn't important enough to include, but my money was just fine. That's not fair." "Fair?" The phrase came out sharply enough that a passing woman looked over uneasily. I dropped my voice. You want to talk about fare? Did Kevin go on this trip? Rachel's silence confirmed everything. Kevin, her spouse, who often grumbled about my employment, made nasty remarks about my single status at 34 and referred to me as a workaholic at every family event. He was present. I stated, that was not a question. He's my husband and I'm your sister. I've been your sister for 34 years, Rachel, since before you could walk. Since I taught you how to tie your shoes and helped you study for your SATs and threw you a baby shower when everyone said you were too young to start a family. My throat clenched. But somehow Kevin, who's known you for 6 years, gets a spot on the vacation I funded and I get left behind. Please don't make this any harder than it already is, Rachel said quietly. Harder for who? For you. I took out my phone with trembling hands. I need to go. Wait, please. Can we talk about this? Maybe grab that coffee? I took a good look at her. My younger sister, who used to follow me around like a shadow, sobbed when I left for college, and said I was her greatest friend. The sister who clearly thought so little of me that she took my money and went on vacation without saying anything. No, I answered simply. I don't think we can. I went away before she could react, my heels tapping on the tile floor in quick, furious beats. My hands were still shaking when I got to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, gazing at my phone screen, with wrath boiling in my chest like a pressure cooker. The parking lot surrounding me seemed unreal. An elderly couple strolled by, clutching shopping bags and giggling about something boring. A kid backed out of a place too hastily, nearly missing another vehicle. The globe continued to revolve while mine only leaned sideways. I opened my banking app with shaky fingers and looked at the transaction dated April 10th. There it was, $5,000 deposited to Michael Harris, my father's account. The note line said, "Family Vacation Fund, can't wait." I'd included a smiling face emoji because I was actually delighted. Looking at that silly emoji made my stomach flip. How long did they know? That question kept buzzing in my mind. The vacation was last month, thus they had been preparing this exclusion for weeks, if not longer. Every family text message, every casual phone contact in which no mention of the trip was made, was a lie. They had looked me in the eye several times throughout those weeks and said nothing. I checked my text messages and went back through the family discussion. Mom had wrote 7 weeks earlier, "Can't wait for our family time together." I replied with hearts and delight. 4 weeks ago, Dad addressed our forthcoming excursion in a group chat. I answered, asking whether we needed to coordinate anything. He'd stated, "All taken care of, sweetheart, all taken care of." He was not mistaken. They had taken care of excluding me while retaining my money. The first call was to my mother. She responded on the third ring, her voice bright and happy. "Sweetheart, how are you?" "I just ran into Chloe at the mall," I explained, my voice strangely calm. "She told me you all went on the family trip last month. The one I contributed $5,000 to." The stillness was so extended that I feared the call had been dropped. "Honey," Mom eventually began, her tone moving to that delicate, placating sound she used when she realized she'd made a mistake. "We were going to tell you. Your father was supposed to call you about the date change. The date change that coincidentally happened without me. You're always so busy with work. We thought..." "Stop." I closed my eyes and pressed my hand on my forehead. "Please stop lying to me. If you didn't want me there, you could have just said so. Instead you took my money and lied about it for weeks." "We didn't lie," Mom insisted. The timing got complicated." "Was there even a date change, or was this the plan all along?" Another breath. This told me everything. "I want my money back," I said. "All of it by the end of the week." "Well, that might be difficult. The money's already been spent on..." "I don't care what it was spent on. You took $5,000 from me under false pretenses. That's theft, Mom. I'm giving you until Friday to return it, or I'm taking legal action." "You wouldn't do that," she said. But her voice trembled. "We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other." "Friday, Mom." I hung up before she could reply. My heart hammered so strongly that I felt dizzy. Take 3 deep breaths. 4. 5. The next call was to my father. Voicemail. Of course. "Dad, it's me. I know about the trip. I know you all went without me after taking my money. I want it back by Friday, or I'm getting lawyers involved. Your choice." My finger was hovering above the next touch. Rachel again? No. I had spoken everything I needed to say to her. But there was another person who needed to hear from me. Kevin answered the first call, his voice arrogant as usual. "Well, well, Heard you ran into Rachel today. You knew? I said you knew the whole time. Knew what? That your family finally got tired of working around your ridiculous schedule, that they decided to actually have fun without waiting for you to pencil them in between meetings? He chuckled, and it made my blood boil. Come on, you had to know this was coming eventually. I paid for that vacation, and they used your money well. The cabin was beautiful. Your parents say thanks, by the way. Something inside of me cracked. Not in a spectacular or explosive fashion. It was more like a frayed cord that eventually gave way after years of use. Quiet, decisive and final. I'm going to ruin you, I replied quietly. Kevin laughed harder this time. What are you going to do? Sue your own family? Good luck with that. You look like a greedy, bitter spinster who can't handle being left out of one trip. We'll see, I said and hung up. My hand stopped shaking. The wrath was still blazing in my chest, but it had become cold and concentrated. I had spent my whole adult life pursuing a profession in financial advising. I understood just how to manage financial conflicts. I knew just who to contact. Dylan Turner answered his office phone on the second ring. Max had been my attorney for years, guiding me through everything from contract negotiations to that disaster with my prior landlord. He was clever, vicious when needed, and owed me a favor. Tell me you're calling with good news, he remarked in welcome. I need your help with something, I told you. Family matter, financial theft, and I need it handled quickly and thoroughly. I'm listening. I described everything. Vacation planning, money transfers, covert trips, and a confrontation in the mall. Max listened without interrupting, and I could almost hear him taking notes. Do you have any documentation of the transfer? He eventually inquired. Bank statements, text messages about the trip planning, emails, everything. And they're refusing to return the funds? Haven't heard back from my dad yet, but my mom basically said they spent it and getting it back would be difficult. That's not how this works, Max responded. And I could detect a grin in his voice. He became predatory when he spotted a case he might win. They accepted money for a specific purpose, failed to fulfill that purpose, and are now refusing to return the funds. That's textbook fraud, possibly theft by deception, depending on how we frame it. How fast can you move on this? I can have a demand letter drafted and sent by tomorrow morning. If they don't respond appropriately within the time frame we give them, we file a civil suit. Given the dollar amount, we could also potentially involve law enforcement, though that gets messier with family. I want the letter sent tomorrow, I explained. Give them 3 business days to respond. If they don't pay back every cent with interest for the time they've had it, we file immediately. You're sure about this? Once we start down this road, there's no going back. Your family's going to be furious. They should have thought about that before they stole from me and lied about it. All right, Max said. I'll get started. Send me all the documentation you have and we'll make this airtight. After hanging up with Max, I remained in my car for a while, watching people come and go from the mall. Families carrying shopping bags, teens laughing, couples holding hands, ordinary folks going about their daily lives, not suffering with betrayal by those who were meant to love them the most. My phone vibrated. A text from Rachel. Please don't do anything rash. We can work this out. Family is more important than money. I wrote back with steadier fingers. You're right. Family should be more important than money. You should have remembered that before you took mine and left me behind. Another buzz. This is from Mom. I talked to your father. We can give you back half now and the rest over the next few months. Please be reasonable about this. Reasonable. They expected me to be fair over their theft. Full amount by Friday or my attorney proceeds with legal action. I said, this is non-negotiable. My phone began ringing instantly. Mom called back. I refused it. It rang again. Rachel this time. Declined. Dad declined. Kevin truly made me chuckle. Definitely declined. 3 voicemails arrived in rapid succession. I removed them without listening. That evening, I submitted all of my documents to Max. Bank accounts reflect a $5,000 transfer in April. Text messages from the family group chat about vacation arrangements, including days I had noted as open on my calendar. Dad sent me emails confirming receipt of my money and offering to handle all the preparations. Screenshots of our talk about activities and food planning. Everything conveyed a clear picture, a family trip planned jointly, funded for in part by me, but carried out without me while they retained my money. Max emailed back within an hour. This is even better than I thought. Their own messages establish intent and agreement. If they fight this, they'll lose badly. Letter goes out at 10 a.m. tomorrow. That night I prepared dinner in my quiet apartment. Pasta with marinara. Simple yet cozy. My phone was vibrating with texts, but I switched off alerts from my family members. Whatever they had to say could wait until they were ready to have an open discussion, which was clearly not going to happen tonight. Around 10 o'clock my doorbell rang. I opened my phone's camera app and saw Rachel standing there, looking sad, clutching what looked to be a bottle of wine. I didn't respond. She rang again and knocked. "Please, I know you're home, your car is here. I just want to talk." Through the webcam, I saw her stand there for 5 minutes, intermittently knocking, before departing. Her shoulders dropped as she went back to her car, and I felt a glimmer of regret. Then I recognized her face from the mall. She tried to rationalize excluding me, and she let her husband ridicule me on the phone. The guilt subsided. The demand letter came at my parents' residence by certified mail the next morning at 11:30 a.m. I know because I received a notice from the tracking application. Max had copied me on the letter, and it was beautiful, professional, cold, and completely damning. It presented the facts simply. Money was transferred for a specified reason. The purpose was not fulfilled. The beneficiary failed to refund money. Legal action will be taken if payment is not received within 3 business days. There's no emotional language. There are no accusations. Simply clean legal professionals who made it quite evident that they had made a mistake. My phone burst. 15 missed calls before noon. Text messages ranged from appealing to furious to confused. Dad left a message that began, "What the heck do you think you're doing?" and ended, "Call me immediately." Kevin didn't respond, which was odd. Rachel wrote a novel-length text about how upset she was that I'd engage attorneys, how she never imagined I'd prioritize money before family, and how disappointed she was in me. I replied once to the family group chat. "You had numerous opportunities to do the right thing. You chose not to. And this is the result of that decision." I then silenced the chat. Work became my shelter. I immersed myself into a new customer proposal, went over financial estimates till my eyes crossed, and remained late at work 3 nights in a row. On Thursday morning, my coworker Olivia spotted and approached me at the coffee machine. "Okay, what's going on?" "You've got that look," she replied, pouring herself a cup of the horrible break room coffee that we all pretended to drink. "What look?" "I'm about to destroy someone's life and I have the spreadsheets to prove it." "Look, I've seen it before. Usually right before you eviscerate someone's terrible business plan in a meeting." Regardless of everything, I grinned. "Family drama. Don't want to bore you with it. Family drama that requires your legal murder face." Now I'm intrigued. I gave her a shortened version. Olivia's eyes widened with each revelation until she was shaking her head in astonishment. "They took $5,000 from you and went without you. Are they insane? Apparently they thought I'd just let it go. Do they not know you at all?" Olivia cracked a joke. "I've watched you spend 6 hours tracking down a $4 accounting error because the principle of it bothered you. Did they really think you'd shrug off $5,000 and a massive betrayal? Seems that way. Well, I hope you crush them," she said gleefully. "Family or not. That's messed up. You want to grab dinner tonight? You look like you could use a friend." I agreed, happy for the diversion. We proceeded to a Thai restaurant downtown, where Olivia amused me with anecdotes about her disastrous dating experiences. It was nice to laugh and think about something other than my family's treachery for a few hours. The deadline arrived on Friday morning. I'd received nothing from my family but more urgent texts, which I continued to ignore. At 9:30 a.m., Max phoned. "They haven't contacted my office," he said. "Want me to file?" I thought about it for precisely 3 seconds. Regarding Rachel's phony grin at the mall. Regarding Mom's placating falsehoods. About Kevin's sarcastic tone. Regarding Dad's quiet through it all. "File it," I said. "Done. You'll have the case number by this afternoon. Fair warning, things are about to get very uncomfortable." They already are, might as well make them count. The lawsuit was entered into the county's record system by midday. Civil action seeking $5,000 in return, plus interest, court expenses, and attorney fees. Max had sued all 3 of them, Mom, Dad, and Rachel, jointly and severally, which meant that any or all of them might be held accountable for the whole sum plus damages. My phone rang non-stop for the remainder of the day. I disregarded it all. At 5:47 p.m., another voice joined the chorus. "Aunt Helen is my mother's sister. She left a message full of disappointment about how I was pulling the family apart over money, how my mother was in tears, and how everyone was stunned that I could be so heartless." I stored the message not to listen to again, but to show the level of pressure they were putting. Max said it could be beneficial later. That evening I received an SMS from an unknown number. It took me a while to recognize it was from my niece Sophia, Rachel's 12-year-old daughter. She was old enough to have her own phone, and evidently old enough to be hired as a courier. Aunt Lisa is really upset. Grandma too, can you please drop this? It's just money. I looked at the message for a long time. They had gotten a teenager interested. They were exploiting a child to attempt to guilt-trip me into giving up. I didn't respond. Max contacted the following Monday to provide an update. They've retained counsel. Jackson Weaver, local guy, does a lot of family law and estate stuff. He's already reaching out about settlement. What are they offering? Full repayment of the principal, no interest, no costs. They want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement and a release waiving any future claims. Absolutely not, I said quickly. They pay everything, including your fees and court costs. No NDA. They apologize in writing and I want confirmation that they understand what they did was wrong. The apology thing isn't standard. I don't care. That's my condition. They can accept it or face me in court. You're really not messing around with this, would you? If your family did this to you. Fair point, Max said. I'll communicate your terms. Counteroffers began to come in. They pay interest, but not attorney's expenses. They paid everything but requested the NDA. They do everything, but the written apology was very insulting. I declined each one. Every time Max would call and run the latest offer by me. And every time I would say no. My terms were my own. Take or leave it. During this time I learned something interesting about standing your ground. People unintentionally show themselves. Aunt Helen contacted me personally one evening, her voice sugary sweet, taking a different approach than her previous guilt trip message. Honey, I understand you're hurt, she told you. But your mother is beside herself. She's not sleeping, barely eating. Is the money really worth destroying her health? Is the money worth stealing? I responded. Because that's what they did. They stole from me. That's such an ugly word, Helen replied, her tone changing significantly. They made an error in their judgment. Humans make errors. Mistakes happen by accident. This was deliberate. They organized a trip, grabbed my money, left without me, and lied for weeks. That is not an error. It is a decision. You always were so black and white about things, she told me. And now the pleasure had vanished, leaving her hard and incapable of forgiving. Your mother warned me you'd be difficult about this. Good, I said. I hope she warned you correctly, because I'm not backing down. Helen hung up on me. I added her name to my mental list of folks who seemed to believe I should simply accept being taken from and ostracized because I was family. The whisper campaign began shortly after that. I learned from common friends that different family members were disseminating their versions of events. I was greedy, preoccupied with money, held grudges for nothing, and ripped the family apart with my selfishness. Someone even indicated that I hadn't wanted to go on the trip and was using it as an excuse to cause trouble. Each falsehood strengthened my determination. We were 4 weeks into our legal struggle when something interesting happened. Olivia entered my office one afternoon with an unusual smile on her face. So, I have weird news, she remarked, slamming the door behind her. Remember my boyfriend Greg? The one I'm always complaining about. The one who's emotionally unavailable but makes good pancakes. That's the one. Anyway, he's an accountant and he was telling me about this new client his firm just took on. Small business owner consulting company having some cash flow issues. She hesitated significantly. The business owner's name is Tyler Sutton. My head snapped up. Tyler is my brother-in-law. Same last name, industry, and approximate location. So I performed some little snooping on LinkedIn, and indeed, it was the same person. Tyler's business is in peril, according to Greg, who may have told me a little too much after 2 beers. Like major difficulty. Has not paid himself a wage in 4 months, which is a problem. I slumped back in my chair, trying to comprehend this knowledge. Tyler teased me over the phone for being a workaholic. Tyler, who appeared so superior during family events. Tyler, who chuckled at the idea of utilizing my money for their vacation. How bad are we talking? Olivia dropped her voice. Greg said the business has maybe 4 months before it's underwater completely. He's trying to restructure debt, but it's not looking good. Something about a large client backing out and taking their ongoing money with them. Huh? I said neutrally, although my mind was already processing the ramifications. Olivia said, "Are you thinking something evil? I can see it on your face." I'm thinking that Tyler Sutton's struggling business consulting company might benefit from the expertise of someone who specializes in financial turnarounds and business restructuring. I accessed my professional network on my computer, for example, the senior financial analyst at Williams Supply Solutions, who is connected to half of the tri-state area's mid-sized enterprises. You're going to help him? Olivia sounded skeptical. Oh no, I said, smiling slightly. I'm going to make sure every potential client he approaches knows exactly what kind of person they'd be working with. I'm going to ensure that every business owner in our network understands that Tyler Sutton is the type of man who thinks stealing from family is funny, that he's financially desperate, that he's exactly the kind of person you don't want having access to your company's financial information. That's diabolical. That's strategic, I said. I'm not going to lie about him. I'm just going to make sure the truth is very well known in all the right circles. I began that evening by casually informing a client over dinner about my continuing family legal predicament. Make sure to mention Tyler and his firm. A statement made at a networking event regarding the necessity of integrity in consulting partnerships, followed by a personal tale about my brother-in-law. I issued a courteous caution to a company owner acquaintance who was seeking for financial consulting services. Nothing actionable, nothing defamatory, simply information given casually, spreading like ripples across my professional network. Max called 2 days later, seeming amused. So, their attorney just contacted me in a panic. Apparently Tyler's business is losing potential clients at an alarming rate, and he's convinced you're behind it. How would I be behind his business failures? I'm not responsible for his reputation or his business management skills. That's essentially what I told their lawyer in more professional terms. But here's the interesting part. They want to settle all your terms. Full payment, attorney fees, court costs, and a written apology from each of them. My heart rate increased. What changed? Tyler's freaking out. He thinks you're going to destroy his business, and honestly, from what their attorney said, it sounds like you're doing exactly that. They want this over before you do more damage. I want to see the apologies before I agree to anything, I told them. And they need to be genuine, not some template their lawyer wrote. The apologies come by email 3 days later. 3 distinct letters, one from each. Dad was short and rough. I'm sorry for not communicating with you about the trip date change, and for not returning your money immediately when you asked. This got out of hand, and I should have handled it better. Mom's was lengthier and more emotional, with explanations of how they assumed I wouldn't mind, how they got caught up in the preparation, and how they never intended to upset me. It felt more like rationalization than apology, although it did include the words, "I'm sorry," as well as an acknowledgement that taking my money and failing to provide what was promised was wrong. Rachel's made me pause. It was 2 pages long, handwritten and scanned. The writing seemed disorganized, as if she had been sobbing while composing it. She apologized for lying to me in the mall, failing to stand up for me, allowing Kevin to influence her family decisions, and taking me for granted. She wrote about how she had always admired me, how jealousy had poisoned their relationship, and how she felt embarrassed of what they had done. I don't expect you to forgive me, she wrote in the conclusion. I know I destroyed something that might not ever be fixed. But I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. You deserve so much better from all of us, but especially from me. I read the letter 3 times while sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of wine. Part of me was still enraged, part of me was fatigued, and a little part of me, hidden under the rage and betrayal, felt sad. We were saddened by what we had and had lost. But I was not prepared to forgive. Perhaps I never would be. The apologies are acceptable, I told Max. Draw up the settlement agreement. The money was deposited into my account on Tuesday morning. $5,000 principal, $160 in accumulated interest, and $7,200 in attorney and court expenses. Watching the deposit arrive in my account seemed strange. I had officially, legally, and utterly won, but it did not feel the way I had imagined. Max contacted to check that I had gotten everything. So, that's done. You planning to have any contact with them going forward? I honestly don't know. I admit that part of me wants to cut them off totally, but they are still my family, and that is tricky. It always is, he said sympathetically. For what it's worth, I think you handled this exactly right. They needed to face real consequences, and you made sure they did. Whether you eventually reconcile or not, at least you stood up for yourself. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my palm, glancing at the family group chat that I had muted weeks before. There were 247 unread messages. I skimmed through them without reading properly. There was a lot of wrath, begging, and efforts to manipulate. Some communications from extended family members expressing their viewpoints. Rachel's note was at the bottom, sent only an hour ago. I know you probably won't read this, and I don't blame you, but I wanted you to know that Kevin and I are in marriage counseling. A lot of stuff came out during all of this, and I'm starting to see how toxic some of our dynamics have been. I'm working on it. Not for you, but for me and the kids. I hope someday we can talk again, but I understand if that never happens. You were right about everything. I gazed at the message for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done in several weeks. I responded, I'm glad you're getting help, that takes courage. I'm not ready for a relationship right now, but I hope the counseling helps you. Her reaction was instantaneous, like if she had been waiting by her phone. Thank you. That means more than you know. I silenced the chat again, but something seemed different this time. Less like slamming a door. More like softly closing it, with the potential that it will open again someday. Work proceeded. Life continued. I attended Olivia's birthday party and laughed with coworkers during outrageous karaoke. I took a long weekend and traveled up to the mountains where I spent 3 days hiking without thinking about family turmoil. I began therapy because although winning my legal struggle, I was still dealing with a lot of mixed thoughts about everything. Kevin's business failed 2 months after the settlement. Olivia's boyfriend claims it wasn't simply due of reputational damage, but that didn't help. The financial issues had been mounting for a long, and losing those potential clients further expedited the process. Kevin accepted a position with a larger consulting firm, rather than starting his own business. I felt neither happy nor sorry about it. It was only information. 4 months after everything was completed, I received a card in the mail. Inside was a child's sketch of 2 stick figures holding hands, with the words, I miss you, Aunt, scrawled in crayon at the top. Sophia, Rachel's daughter, had sketched it on the back using Rachel's handwriting. No pressure, just wanted you to know you're thought of. I posted the drawing on my refrigerator. 6 months later, Sophia received her birthday invitation. A children's party at a nearby bouncy house facility. The invitation was specifically targeted to me. No +1, no assumptions. Would love to have you there, but no hard feelings if you're not ready. Rachel, I sent an RSVP. Yes. The gathering was weird. Mom sobbed when she saw me and attempted to hug me, but I stood rigid and uncomfortable. Dad shook my hand politely, as if we were business acquaintances. Kevin remained on the opposite side of the party the entire time, which was okay with me. But Sophia lighted up when she spotted me, racing up for an embrace that was sincere and straightforward in the manner that only a 12-year-old's adoration can be. Rachel and I didn't say much, but when the kids were devouring cake, she walked over to where I was standing by the punch bowl. Thank you for coming, she said gently. It means a lot to Sophia especially. But to me too. She's a good kid, I explained. This isn't her fault, and she shouldn't be punished because the adults in her life messed up. Fair, Rachel said. She paused and continued. I really am in therapy, it's helping. I'm learning a lot about boundaries and people-pleasing and letting other people's opinions influence me too much. It's hard work, but I'm trying. Good, I said simply. I hope it helps. We stood silently for a moment, watching the children play. It was not pleasant, but it was not aggressive either. It was just neutral, a beginning point, perhaps for something different than what we had previously. I did not remain long after the cake was served. I said my goodbyes to Sophia, nodded to my parents, and went without much ceremony. But, when I drove home, I saw something had changed. The wrath that had propelled me throughout the legal struggle, burning hot and concentrated for months, had now subsided to a reasonable level. I had stood up for myself. I had created a line and enforced it. I had sought responsibility and received it. I wasn't sure whether my family and I would ever have a regular connection again. Maybe we'd form a new configuration that acknowledged what had transpired while respecting the constraints I'd set. Perhaps we wouldn't. And I'd have to grieve and move on nonetheless. Regardless, I'd learnt something useful. My worth was not negotiable. My dignity was unquestionable, and the people in my life, whether family or not, had to treat me with the respect I deserved, or they would have no place in my life at all. That mall meeting, as painful as it was in the moment, provided me with clarity. It had shown where I stood in my family's priorities, forcing me to choose what I was ready to accept. I refused to accept treachery, even from those who were meant to love me the most. A year after the mall incident, I got a text from Rachel on a random Tuesday afternoon. There's no special event, birthday, or holiday. Just remember how we used to get coffee at that place on 5th Street before you drove me to my college classes. I was thinking about that today. Those were good times. I considered that message for a time before answering. They were. The vanilla lattes were terrible, but the company was good. They were really terrible, she acknowledged. I'm free Saturday morning if you want to grab coffee somewhere with better lattes. No pressure. I pondered about it for precisely 10 seconds before responding. Saturday works. 10 a.m. It's a date, and I'm buying. You're definitely buying, I confirmed. Saturday morning came, dreary and drizzly. Typical autumnal weather. I nearly canceled 3 times, my hand hanging over my phone and fear rising in my gut. But I had promised to go, and I followed through. Rachel was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 lattes and a look of genuine worry on her face. When she spotted me, she stood and appeared hesitant whether to hug me or not, so she did this uncomfortable half-wave instead. "Hi," she said. "I got you a vanilla latte, but I can get something else if you want." "This is fine," I responded, sitting across from her. We spoke for 2 hours. Not about the lawsuit or treachery. Not at first. We spoke about work, her kids, the book she was reading, and my recent unsuccessful effort to plant tomatoes on my apartment balcony. Small discussion, safe talk, the type of conversation you have while you're trying to figure out if there's anything left to save. As we were about to depart, Rachel finally brought up the issue we had been avoiding. "I know I've apologized in writing, but I need to say it in person," she continued, her hands wrapped around her empty coffee cup. "What we did to you was unforgivable. I've been working through it in therapy, trying to understand why I let it happen, why I didn't stand up for you. There's no excuse that makes it okay. I just wanted you to hear me say that out loud, looking at you, not hiding behind a letter." "Okay," I responded. Because what else was there to say? "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," she said. "I know that's probably impossible, but I hope maybe we can figure out something new, something better, even built on honesty this time instead of assumptions and taking each other for granted." "Maybe," I responded slowly. "But it's going to take time, Rachel. A lot of time. Trust isn't something you can just rebuild overnight." "I know. I'm willing to put in that time if you are." I looked at my younger sister. Really stared at her. She had lost weight. At my brother's college party, Dad said, "He'll take the Mustang." "I spent 14 months rebuilding it," I said, "not happening." A week later, the title was gone. So as a 24-year-old boy, I've spent my whole life living in my brother's shadow. My younger brother, 21-year-old Lucas, has always been treated as if he were God's gift to humanity, and I am essentially the invisible kid who no one cares about. It has been like way since we were little. I clearly recall winning first place in the district science fair when I was in 9th school. I spent weeks developing this awesome solar-powered water filtering system. When I returned home with the blue ribbon, my mother just murmured, "That's nice, dear," and returned to assisting Lucas in creating a poster for his social studies assignment, which was due the next day. He received a B- on it, and they treated him to ice cream to commemorate his hard work. Christmas was always a total farce in our household. Lucas' pile of presents would reach the ceiling. All the latest gaming gear, the greatest clothing, and everything else he'd been moaning about for the previous 7 months. My pile consisted of whatever was inexpensive, a flannel shirt if I was lucky, and the rare item that was genuinely beneficial for my endeavor. Mom would say practical presents with a smug smile on her face, as if she earned a medal for purchasing me work gloves while Lucas received a Nintendo. Dad was usually in the backyard with Lucas, teaching him how to toss a football or helping him create scientific projects. I'd be in the garage alone, watching YouTube videos to learn how to fix things since no one had time to teach me. When I asked Dad for help, he always said, "In a minute." A minute that somehow stretched into years. I eventually stopped asking. The golden child BS extended much beyond gifts and attention. Lucas would physically ruin Mom's car and they'd just brush it off. "Accidents happen, honey." I'd arrive home 7 minutes after curfew from working a late shift at the hardware store and be grounded for 3 weeks. Different world, different rules when you're the favored. When we were 17 and 15, Lucas went through a phase when he would borrow my belongings without asking. He once took my iPod to school, back when they were still popular, and some student stole it from his backpack. When I became upset, my parents advised me to be more sympathetic because he is going through a difficult time right now. The bottom line is that he did not make the JV basketball team's first string. They never replaced it, but Lucas received a fresh new one 3 weeks later since he needed music for his exercises. I realized quite quickly that nobody in our house had my back but me. So I shut up, lowered my head, and worked my ass off. I got my first job washing dishes at a greasy spoon cafe. I saved every penny and began studying skills via YouTube and the old folks at the hardware shop, where I ultimately found work. I didn't need their approval anyhow. My parents had a blind spot that perfectly matched my size and form. They'd remember to get Lucas's favorite cereal but forgot I was sensitive to peanuts. They'd drive 5 hours to witness Lucas's regional baseball game, but couldn't bring themselves to attend my high school graduation since it was such a long event and parking would be a headache. It sounds like I'm making this stuff up, but I promise I'm not. It's as if I'm a supporting role in a bizarre sitcom that no one remembers. Then, oh yeah, there's another kid too. My son. The truth is that Lucas was just as awful as my parents in his own way. He is entitled, greedy, and smug about his status as a golden kid. He repeatedly rubbed it in my face. Mom said yes to me, but she'd probably say no to you, Dad used to say with a chuckle when I was younger. Or he'd accidentally smash my belongings and then play innocent when I got furious. By the time we reached high school, I had pretty much accepted my place in the family hierarchy. Keep your expectations modest so you do not be disappointed. So I concentrated on things I could control. My grades, occupations, friends and projects. So here comes my grandfather, a 74-year-old man. Grandpa Frank was the only person who ever actually saw me. Ironically, he was my father's father, a former Marine and old-school technician capable of stripping an engine blindfolded if necessary. He was a legend with his hands. While my parents were busy cheering on Lucas's soccer games or fretting over his school performances, I'd be in Grandpa's garage learning how to change oil, replace spark plugs and eventually rebuild carburetors. Those were the days when I felt like someone cared about me. You got something special in those hands, boy, he'd say as we worked side by side on whatever beater he was cleaning up. Your father never had the tolerance for this crap, always too busy pursuing the next promotion, the next great thing. He shook his head, as if unsure where he went wrong with his kid. Grandpa saw right through my folks' partiality nonsense. My parents once forgot my 16th birthday. Like, I completely forgot. They recalled the day before that Lucas had a swimming competition the next day and the entire family had to go. My mother remarked, "Oh, it's your birthday tomorrow, isn't it? We'll celebrate next weekend." They didn't even bring me a cake. When Grandpa discovered out, he was furious. He arrived at our place that night with a toolbox covered in newspaper. Inside came a stunning pair of precision screwdrivers that I'd been coveting for months. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he announced loudly enough for my parents to hear from the kitchen. Some are worth celebrating properly. Every Christmas, as I opened my parents' utilitarian gifts, socks, school supplies, etc., Grandpa would slip me something real. Quality tools. Most of it I still use today. One year my folks grumbled about it. My mother had the audacity to comment, "He doesn't need to be spoiled, Frank." As if a nice set was akin to the new iPhone Lucas had just gotten. Grandpa just gazed at her like she was an idiot. "Recognizing talent isn't spoiling. It's investing," he said, winking at me. When I was 19, Grandpa was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Unfortunately, the news is not good. He couldn't drive anymore, so he contacted me one week and said he had something for me. They said it wasn't attractive, but it had nice bones. This was one of his favorite expressions. I drove over to his house, thinking he would be giving me some of his old tools or something. Instead, there was this 1968 Mustang Fastback parked in his driveway, faded Highland green, with more rust than paint, ripped seats, and an engine that made sounds I didn't know a car could make. But holy hell, that was the most stunning sight I'd ever seen. Grandpa handed me the keys and said he had been keeping them for me since I was 13. He said he had seen how my parents treated me over the years and felt I deserved something special. He had intended to fix it himself, but as Parkinson's disease progressed, his hands no longer worked properly. "Your dad never appreciated muscle cars," he added, brushing his fingers over the rusting hood. "But you'll bring her back to life." I'm not going to lie, I had to step away for a moment. I got something in my eye, or whatever. When I drove that rust bucket home, my folks chuckled when they spotted it in the driveway. When I informed my father about it, he didn't even glance up from his phone. Just remarked, "Don't waste your money on that death trap." My father was too preoccupied with this pile of garbage. A pile of junk? Nah. Now I understand what Grandpa was trying to tell me. Mom just grumbled about the oil spots on the concrete. When Lucas saw it, his eyes glowed like Christmas morning. "Wow, that's going to be so badass when it's fixed up," Grandpa exclaimed, despite the fact that he had never shown it to me. And for once, I felt like I possessed something he coveted. He couldn't just complain to our parents about it. For 14 months I dedicated every spare minute to that automobile. Following rent and food, every paycheck was spent on parts. I learned how to weld and repair an engine by watching countless YouTube videos and reading forums. My hands were permanently coated with grease, my fingernails were never totally clean, and my arms were covered in minor burns and scratches. My room was packed with Chilton manuals and wiring diagram printouts. I'd fall asleep thinking about valve timing, then wake up, contemplating bodywork. When things went bad at home, as they always did, I'd go to the garage and bury myself in the restoration. Working on vehicles has an almost meditative quality to it. When you enter the zone, it's just you and the machine. Everything else melts away. I sourced parts from junkyards, swap meetings, and internet forums, rebuilt the 428 V8 piece by piece, sandblasted the body down to bare metal, and meticulously repaired the rust patches, learning to weld and shape metal along the way. I painted in my buddy's uncle's shop after hours. I traded work for booth time, completely reupholstered the inside. The day I finally got that engine to operate properly, hearing the deep rumbling of the V8 come to life, it seemed like everything I'd worked for had finally paid off. The Highland green paint shone in the sunlight. Yes, I choose the bullet color. Sue me. The black leather upholstery smelt like a fresh start. And when I took her for her first real drive, windows down, engine growling, I realized that for the first time in my life, I truly owned something. Something I constructed with my own two hands that no one could claim credit for. She was my success, and no one could take that away from me. Growing up as the overlooked kid teaches you to accept that others don't actually want your goods. Nobody fought over borrowing my clothing or playing with my games, since in their opinion, Lucas always had the superior version. So I was surprised by what happened when, for the first time in my life, I had something worth envying. And wow, Lucas envied that Mustang. So after I had the Mustang operating correctly, Lucas couldn't stop raving about it. Every time I drove it, he'd be at the window, staring like a kid at an ice cream truck. When I pulled in, he'd dash out to the garage. "Can I sit in it for just a minute?" At first I didn't mind too much. It was good to have someone recognize all of my efforts. My folks didn't care. Dad simply moaned about equipment taking up room in the garage, while Mom continued making passive-aggressive remarks about squandering money rather than investing for a true future, whatever that meant. But then Lucas's request became increasingly bothersome. It changed from, "Can I sit in it?" to, "May I drive it to prom for one night? I'll be very careful." Then it was, "Let me take it to the beach this weekend." My friend would freak if I picked him up in this, he said, his voice full of arrogance. Of course I would say yes, since that is what everyone has always done with Lucas. I always declined, not because I wanted to be a jerk to my brother. I replied no since I knew Lucas. This is the youngster who broke 4 phones in a single year. The child who borrowed his father's costly golf clubs for one afternoon and somehow lost half of the set. The child who never cared about anything since he didn't have to. Something was usually replaced when he broke it. He didn't have to be held accountable for anything since of course my parents had his back. And you think I'm insane for letting him drive my beautifully restored vintage Mustang after witnessing that track record his whole life? Hell no. The anxiety continued building. Lucas would roll his eyes when I declined, saying things like, "It's just a car, dude. You're so crazy anxious. Just an automobile. Just a car." As if I hadn't spent 14 months and every spare cash repairing the darn thing. Then my parents started making these small comments at dinner, like, sharing is part of being a good brother, and that car usually sits in the garage. Anyway, we have a conventional layout at our house. What Lucas wants, he gets. Except this time, I wouldn't budge. My father attempted to guilt trip me one night. "When I was your age, I was often sharing with my brothers. That's what family does." I nearly laughed in his face. This is from the guy who physically hid the excellent food in his office so he wouldn't have to share them with his children. I just answered, "When you were my age, did you rebuild a classic car from the ground up with money you earned while working your ass off in college?" That silenced him for approximately 7 minutes. My mother attempted a different angle. She cornered me in the kitchen one morning, holding her coffee cup and giving me that false, worried face. "Honey, I'm afraid about you becoming too tied to material possessions. It's only metal and rubber. Relationships are what count in life." It's interesting that they worry about keeping a solid connection with Lucas. Things came to a head when Lucas was accepted to State University. My parents prepared a huge party and invited everyone they knew. I mean, excellent for him, but state isn't Harvard. It's a respectable institution with a 65% admission rate. But he barely got in due to his terrible grades and Dad's alumni connection, so whatever. I showed up and complimented him. During supper, Dad stood up and revealed that they had a surprise for Lucas. Dad began talking about how Lucas would need transportation to campus, which was approximately 45 minutes away, and then looked directly at me, stating they felt I should allow Lucas use the Mustang while he was at school. The entire table turned to look at me, expecting me to smile and play along as usual. Like I was about to respond, "Sure, take the car. I spent 14 months repairing the one possession I own that meant something to me." "No problem at all." I just answered. "No, that's not happening." They all responded as if I had suggested we sacrifice the family dog. There was dead stillness at the table. Dad attempted to smooth things up by stating we'd talk about it later, but I shut that down as well. I told him there wasn't much to discuss. That was my automobile. This is the end of the narrative. Mom jumped in, telling me not to be selfish, since Lucas needed reliable transportation at this critical period in his life, as if college was somehow more essential than, I don't know, my entire existence. I ordered them to purchase him a car just like they did with everything else he requested. That's when Dad became enraged, slapped his hand on the table, nearly knocking over the gravy bucket, and claimed I was being foolish about a vehicle. I stepped up and finally spoke what I had been keeping in for years. I told him it was my car, that I rebuilt myself, that I had the title for, that I paid for with my own money, and that I wasn't handing it to Lucas just because he asked for it. I told them that for once in their life, they could say no to their lovely golden kid. He suggested Lucas understand what it's like to struggle for something rather than have everything delivered to him on a silver platter. Mom glanced at me, as if she couldn't believe I was sticking up for myself. Dad looked like he was about to rupture a blood vessel. Lucas merely sat there with that grimace, undoubtedly annoyed that his regular want-what-I-get approach had encountered a stumbling block. I left before anyone could say anything else. The next morning, Dad tried again. He attempted a new approach this time. "Listen, son," he began, as though we were discussing a deal. "I know you've put a lot of work into that automobile. What if we compensated you for this? We could put some money toward another project car for you to work on while Lucas drives the Mustang. He needs it right now." I just chuckled. "You don't understand, do you? It's not about money. I do not want another project vehicle. I want my automobile, which I have previously restored. And don't repeat the phrase 'it's just a car,' because it isn't. It means far more to me than that." Then he attempted to be selfish again. "Lucas has an opportunity here. This has the potential to significantly increase his chances of success. Don't you want the best for your brother?" I was so sick of that line. How about what is best for me, Dad? Has that ever crossed your mind? The expression on his face spoke everything I needed to know. It actually hadn't. Things at home remained strained for several weeks. My mother used the quiet treatment, as if I were the one being unreasonable. My father continued making small jabs about team members and family sacrifice. Lucas alternated between pouting and attempting to cheer me up with his unexpected brotherly interest in my life. I simply kept my head down, concentrating on my studies and job. I spent as little time at home as possible. I really considered obtaining my own apartment, despite the fact that rent in our neighborhood was exorbitant. But I began planning. I believed they'd ultimately get over it and get Lucas a car like any other parent would, one that they could afford. But they didn't want to, since why invest money when they could get my automobile for free? After 10 days, I received a call from my aunt in Michigan. Grandpa Frank's health has taken a severe decline. Parkinson's disease was worsening, and at a routine exam, physicians discovered several other concerns. They were concerned about heart issues. Apparently, I panicked and decided to go up to Michigan to visit him. It was roughly a 7-hour journey, and I planned to remain for a long weekend. I told my parents I was leaving, despite the fact that we had scarcely spoken since the dinner dispute. Mom simply nodded and told them to offer Grandpa his love. Dad grumbled something about me skipping work. Classic. I was irritated because they didn't care about Grandpa. My friend Mason, who has always enjoyed my grandfather's stories, was aware of the trip. He became sad for him and offered to drive with me. "I've been eager to see this great man," he explained. "I considered taking the Mustang, but Michigan roads in late spring are sheer horror, with potholes the size of kiddie pools from winter freeze-thaw cycles. I didn't want to risk damaging the recently rebuilt undercarriage. Furthermore, Mason's truck had greater heat, and Michigan was still cold in May, so we took that instead. When we arrived in Michigan, my whole demeanor altered. Grandpa was in bad shape. Seeing this powerful old Marine who used to carry me on his shoulders, now hardly able to handle a coffee cup, truly upset me. His body was failing him, but his intellect remained keen as ever. "Did you take your time coming here?" When we came in, he muttered and smirked, letting me know he was kidding. We sat down with him, and he began giving us war stories and historical tales, which Mason thoroughly enjoyed. It was nice to see Grandpa happy again, even if just for a moment. Mason had to return after the first weekend for work, but I opted to remain longer. Grandpa's condition was worse than I had anticipated, and I wanted to be present. I slept on a cot in his assisted living facility room, supported him in moving, and ensured he ate appropriately. We had several nice conversations throughout those nearly 3 weeks. He inquired about the Mustang, of course. I showed him photos of the completed restoration on my phone, and his eyes lighted up. "Damn, buddy, you did well. Really fantastic job. I am proud of you, kiddo." Then he asked about my parents and Lucas. Saw right through my hazy responses. "Aren't they giving you crap about that car?" I nodded. I told him about Lucas wanting it for college and the major battle. Grandpa simply shook his head. "Your father never understood the importance of working with your hands. I've always wanted the easy way." He then looked me full in the eye. "Don't give in. Do you hear me? That automobile is yours. You constructed it. You keep it," I promised him. After almost 3 weeks, Grandpa had stabilized enough that I felt comfortable returning home. The nurse had an excellent schedule with him, and my aunt visited him every day. I took the Greyhound bus back. It was a long, unpleasant journey, and I was fatigued. When I arrived at our town's bus terminal, I ordered an Uber to drive me home because no one in my family offered me a ride, despite the fact that I texted my estimated arrival time. When I pulled into our driveway, something seemed strange right away. The Mustang was not in the garage where I had parked it. I assumed my father had relocated it to work on his own project vehicle, so I looked everywhere, including the street, parking lot, and side yard. Nothing. I raced inside and discovered my mother in the kitchen. "Where is my car?" I demanded. She startled as if astonished to see me and quickly tried to change the conversation. "Oh, you are back. How's your granddad doing?" "Where is my Mustang?" I repeated, not allowing her to deflect. She refused to meet my gaze. She became quite interested in the dish she was drying. "Lucas transported it to college. He needed an automobile for school. And since you were gone..." My blood ran cold. "He drove my car to campus after I said no to everyone. Are you serious?" Dad walked in, and I could tell by the look on his face that he understood what was going on. "Now listen," he began in his courtroom voice. "We tried to call you, but reception was spotty up there." I fired back. "I had a signal the entire time. I texted you every day with updates on Grandpa. You didn't call because you knew what I was going to say." Dad carried on. "Look, what's done is finished. Lucas needs the car more than you do right now. So what am I doing? Just existing. That is my car. I'm heading to campus right now to get it." "That might be difficult," Dad said. "The title has been transferred legally. Lucas now owns the car." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. "You did what?" I swear my brain captured a screenshot. He said it in a way that suggested he was discussing the weather. It just makes more sense for him to have it right. "Did you transfer my title? How in the hell did you do that without my signature?" They exchanged a look that revealed everything I needed to know. "So, about that. We forged your signature." "Are you really kidding me? That is illegal." "Don't be so dramatic," Mom snapped, finally giving up the sweet act. "We're your parents. We were simply making the right decision." I pulled out my phone and began dialing. "Who are you calling?" Mom inquired, suddenly nervous. "The police." Dad lunged forward, grabbing my phone. "Do not be stupid, you're going to regret it." I looked at them. They were already boiling. "Yes, someone will regret this. But it will not be me." I took my phone back and walked out. I called Mason, and he immediately came to pick me up. "What happened, dude? You look like you saw a ghost." I told him everything. "What the actual hell?" was all Mason could say at first. "I crashed on his couch that night, too angry to even consider returning home. I kept picturing Lucas driving my car around campus, flaunting it like he owned it, and my parents believing they'd gotten away with it. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Mason's father, Richard, returned home late from work. Fortunately, he is a lawyer. Mason told him what had happened, and then he joined us. He told me that what they did was clearly illegal. Grand theft, auto forgery, and fraud are all felonies. But he warned me that I should think carefully about whether I want to go down this road with my family because they could face serious consequences. But guess what? I had no ass to give. Allow them to face whatever hell was coming because they deserved it. That night, my phone was flooded with texts from my parents, all variations of, "Come home so we can talk about this. You're overreacting, and family comes first." I ignored them all and slept, knowing I was about to teach them a lesson. That is when Operation Takedown began. The following day, the first stop was the DMV, the most boring place on the planet. But man, was it worth the 3-hour wait? I requested records of the Mustang's title transfer. Sure enough, there it was. My signature on the transfer papers was dated precisely when I was sitting in a hospital room in Michigan with Grandpa. I also obtained copies of the original title, which showed that the car was legally mine since Grandpa signed it over. Next, I went through all of my files at home while my parents were at work. I had always kept meticulous records for the Mustang restoration. I had every receipt, every before and after photo, and every piece of evidence that it was my project from the start. I had the original bill of sale from Grandpa to me. I even received texts from my parents acknowledging that it was my car project. Then Richard suggested we get proof that I was in Michigan when the title transfer occurred. This was the clever part. I went to my bank and obtained ATM camera footage that showed me taking cash from a Michigan ATM on the same day the transfer. Documents were signed. I was about 0.2 miles away from the DMV when my signature appeared on the paperwork. While everything was going on, my phone was constantly blowing up. My parents left frantic voicemails that began with wrath. "How dare you not answer our calls?" Complete indignation turned to shame. "We're so worried about you." Finally, they settled on manipulation. "If you love your brother, you'll come home and we can work this out as a family." I didn't answer to anything. I was finished chatting. This was much beyond anything a family reunion could resolve. With all of the proof in hand, Richard and I headed to the police station to report grand theft, auto forgery, and fraud. Walking out of that police station seemed like I had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just accepting whatever garbage my family wanted to dole out. I fought back. The wheels of justice moved slowly, but they did spin. It took them roughly a month to address my concern. My parents' attempts to reach me have escalated during the last 4 weeks. The messages were increasingly frantic. "Stop being dramatic and come back home immediately." And "You're tearing the family apart for a crappy car." And my particular favorite, "You're making a mountain out of a molehill." They took my automobile, faked my signature on legal documents, and intimidated me when I confronted them about it. But, yes, I was overreacting. I kept myself occupied during those weeks. I worked additional shifts at work, helped Mason's father around the home to thank them for letting me remain, and began looking for my own apartment, deciding it was finally time to break away from my family's BS. After almost a month of silence from the police, the detective phoned. "We're moving on your case," he said. "Officers are on their way to your brother's dorm to recover the vehicle." As I hung up, my pulse pounded. It was really occurring. I was partly certain the officers would just dismiss it as a family affair. But when the officers arrived at Lucas's hostel to reclaim the Mustang, it was not there. According to his roommate, Lucas took it to a friend's house for safekeeping after receiving concerned texts from our parents. Because obviously, he had. That's when things became extremely serious. What began as a family squabble quickly escalated into a criminal probe. The cops traced the automobile to a storage place approximately an hour away from school. The flat was rented under a false name, but they tracked the payment back to my father's credit card, where they discovered my Mustang under a tarp with the VIN plates already removed. The detectives claimed it was obvious proof that they intended to either sell it illegally or make it disappear forever. Removing VIN plates is a criminal in and of itself. The following day, Lucas was arrested in his room for receiving stolen stuff and conspiracy. My parents were arrested at work and accused with forgery, fraud, and tampering with evidence. The local newspaper published a piece titled, "Family Charged in Classic Car Theft Scheme." There was even a photo of my parents being led into court for their arraignment. My phone practically burst after that. Relatives I hardly knew called to inquire what the heck was going on. High school pals were messaging to see whether the reports were real. My parents, now desperate, were phoning hourly with sobbing appeals to dismiss the charges in their wildest dreams. "This will ruin Lucas's future," Mom wailed on one voicemail. "He could go to jail. Is this what you want for your brother?" Another from Dad. "You are a complete jerk. The legal expenses are depleting our finances. We could lose our house." I did not call back. Not once. They had made their decision when they thought stealing from me was acceptable. Now they were sucking it up. My extended family had divided. Some people were outraged by what my parents had done, including my aunt in Michigan. Naturally, others sided with my parents. My mom's sister left me a nasty message about how I was ruining the family over a silly automobile. I didn't respond. What was the point? Despite the uproar, I remained calm, as if nothing they said or did could touch me anymore. I'd spent my entire life as the nice child, the sensible one, the one who swallowed it up and coped with whatever injustice came my way. And where had that led me? Nowhere. The most startling call came from Lucas at the county prison. He seemed desperate, which was unlike his normal confident tone. He began by claiming that everything was a misunderstanding, and that he assumed I was okay with his having the automobile since our parents had stated so. I stopped him off right then and ordered him not to lie. He knew precisely what he was doing since I warned him directly at dinner that he would never have my automobile. After a moment he confessed it. He stated he assumed I wouldn't file charges since families stick together or something like that. He wrote, "My father claimed it wasn't a big deal because they're my parents, and that the car was a waste on me anyway because I just worked on it instead of driving it somewhere worthwhile." Pure entitled BS, but precisely what I've faced with my entire life. Then he had the arrogance to beg me to dismiss the charges because they were going to ruin his life. I just chuckled, welcomed him to the world of consequences, and hung up. As the investigation progressed, I received regular updates from the detective. The evidence was overwhelming, he stated. The prosecution was certain they had a good case based on the falsified signature, ATM footage confirming I was out of state, and the removal of the VIN plates. "Your parents' attorney has reached out about a plea deal," the detective informed me. "They want to make this go away." I believe they did. But it wasn't going away. Not this time. Edit 1. I didn't anticipate this to draw so much attention. Thank you everyone. Edit 2. For those who have requested an update, I will provide one as soon as possible. Things are a little messy right now, so please pardon me till I am free. So here's a roundup. Hello Reddit. It's been a little over a year since my initial article went viral, and many of you have messaged me asking for an update. And let me tell you, there is a lot to say, so buckle up. So the judicial system is sluggish as hell, but it gets there eventually. Over the following few months, I observed from a distance as my family's pristine image crumbled. It turned out that the prosecution was not interested in any plea negotiations. Lucas received a felony conviction for grand theft auto and tampering with evidence. Was sentenced to 10 months in county prison, 4 years probation, and 600 hours of community service. When the conviction was announced, State University dismissed him immediately. No appeals and no second chances. My parents did not fare much better. Dad was charged with forgery, fraud, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. Mom faced the same accusations because it was shown that she was the one who faked my signature. They were both sentenced to 24 months probation, huge penalties, and 45 days in county prison, which the court refused to let them serve on weekends despite their requests. Dad lost his accounting job. It turns out that corporations dislike having convicted fraudsters around to handle money. Their immaculate reputation was entirely shattered. In addition to the criminal accusations, the civil suit I brought with Richard's assistance impacted them hard. They had to sell their home to pay court expenses and damages. Last I heard, they were living in a squalid apartment and barely making ends meet. They attempted to declare bankruptcy to avoid the civil judgment, but the court refused them. They made one final attempt to contact us via their court-appointed counsel. I offered to take out a second mortgage on the property they were already selling to pay for the car and more if I just dismissed the charges. Said we were still a family and could overcome this. I returned one line through Richard. "We stopped being a family when you picked Lucas over me for the final time." The Mustang was finally removed from the storage container. The court ordered that it be returned to me, plus damages for attempted theft and mental anguish. It returned with a damage in the fender and other scuffs, but nothing I couldn't repair. While all of this legal crap was going on, I had been staying with Mason and his family, but I realized I needed a more permanent answer. I wasn't just looking to move out, I wanted to get out of that harmful atmosphere totally. So I made my selection. I packed up all I had, which was not much. It's amazing how little you need when you start new. I resigned my job and came to Michigan to live with Grandpa Frank. His Parkinson's was not improving, and he required more continuous care than my aunt could provide with her work and children. It was truly the finest decision I'd ever made. I transferred my community college credits to a nearby school and began working part-time at a local vehicle restoration company, where they valued my abilities. The first weekend after I moved here, I took the Mustang up to see Grandpa. He seemed really exhausted. The sight of him crushed my heart. I assisted him to the parking lot so he could see the car well in the sunshine. He brushed his shaking palm across the fender. The smile on his face was adorable. He was ecstatic that I moved in with him. Living with Grandpa for a few months was the finest thing that could have happened to both of us. I'd help him with everything, even cooking his meals, while he sat at the kitchen table giving me advice on compression ratios and valve timing. We'd watch classic westerns together in the evening, him falling asleep halfway through but insisting I tell him how they ended anyhow. After Grandpa's health deteriorated, my parents attempted several visits. He declined to see them. He claimed he didn't want to see those two hypocrites. Grandpa passed away roughly 7 months after I moved into his home. He passed away quietly in his sleep. I was with him last night, telling him about the 1970 Charger that the shop had just taken in for restoration. I wept for him. Still do. My family attended the funeral. Lucas looked like horrible following his time in county jail. My parents seemed worn down and aged. I maintained my distance even when they attempted to converse. I didn't trust myself to say something that wouldn't cause a scene. And Grandpa deserved more than that. On his last day after the funeral, I was astonished to see that Grandpa had left me everything: his home, tools, and small funds. My father appeared to have been smacked when the lawyer read the will. I guess he was banking on an inheritance to aid with their financial issues as a result of the legal turmoil. The lawyer then handed me an envelope containing a letter from Grandpa. The letter began with, "To my real son." He stated that the last several months with me were the happiest he'd been in years. He even asked that I maintain the Mustang running smoothly. I couldn't help it. I sobbed when I read it. I still kept the note in the Mustang's glove compartment. Still in Michigan, living at Grandpa's home. I've made some good friends, have a job I enjoy, and my future seems promising. Every Sunday when the weather is nice, I take the Mustang for a long drive along the coastal roads near the lake we drive on. My relatives called me several times, pleading for assistance. I always blocked them and told them to go to hell. The door is closed and secured. Parents gave me until Friday to leave the house. Grandparents built. On Friday, I wasn't alone. My legal team was ready, and their faces went white. Sometimes life tosses you curveballs that you don't see coming. And for me, Celine, at 27, it was the gut-wrenching knowledge that my own flesh and blood would strive to take away everything my grandparents had built. They strutted in here, all smiles, believing they had me surrounded, gloating about handing over the house to my father's name, and told me I had till Friday to go. But their features contorted in amazement and bewilderment when they returned with a moving truck and saw who was waiting on my porch. Oh, that was completely priceless. And really, they deserved everything. To truly appreciate why I went to such great pains to preserve my grandparents' legacy, you must first comprehend the entire tale. My grandparents, Aldrich and Isolde Morgan, reared me since I was 5 years old. My parents, Garrick and Serafina, basically abandoned me to pursue their careers in another state. What they were really after was a life free of real responsibility, jumping from one get-rich-quick scheme to the next, each of which flopped spectacularly. My childhood home was not just ordinary house. It was a stunning Victorian situated in a historic neighborhood in Boston. This mansion had been in my grandfather's family for 3 generations, and it was part of a larger estate that comprised other important properties and investments valued approximately $3 million. Not a little fortune, right? But for me, that house was simply home. This is when I learnt the genuine meaning of family. Every morning, Grandma Isolde would wake me up with the most delicious smell of freshly cooked muffins. "Rise and shine, little lawyer," she'd say, long before I'd even considered law school. Grandpa Aldrich, bless his heart, taught me how to fish in the small pond at the neighborhood park. his patience seemingly limitless, even as I nodded my line repeatedly. In the evenings, we'd sit in the library, each buried in our own books and occasionally exchanging a section that piqued our interest. Those peaceful moments, those little encounters, meant everything to me. I learned from them the virtues that would shape my life: honesty, hard effort, and responsibility. Grandpa used to say, "Your word is your bond, Celine. Break it, and you lose something you can never buy back." Grandma, on the other hand, always emphasized education and independence. "A woman must be able to stand on her own 2 feet," she'd often say, especially when others try to knock her down. My relationship with my biological parents and younger sister Callista was, to put it mildly, problematic. They'd turn up around twice a year, generally around Christmas when gifts were expected, or any time they needed money. Every visit was the same: exaggerated adoration, then casual queries about Grandpa's finances, and eventually a tearful narrative about some unexpected expense, invariably followed by a request for a loan, which, of course, was never repaid. My father had filed for bankruptcy twice before I was even 10. Mom had dabbled in various questionable business ventures, peddling everything from miracle diet pills to timeshares. They lived far over their means, continuously looking for the next great chance that would eventually make them wealthy. Callista, 7 years younger than me, grew up observing and learning from them. By her adolescent years, she had perfected their manipulation and entitlement skills. "Your sister should come live with us too," Grandma once proposed after a particularly terrible visit, during which Callista stole money from my piggy bank. But my parents flatly refused. Callista was their baby, the child they could manage to raise because she required little actual parenting. As my grandparents became older, the family dynamic became increasingly tense. Dad began phoning more frequently, asking hard questions about their health, wills, and financial advisors. Mom would send links to retirement communities, quietly indicating that the house was too much for them to handle. Each visit became a cause of utter anxiety, with quiet conversations that abruptly ended as I entered a room. Through my school years, I prospered intellectually, thanks to my grandparents' unwavering support. While other children received new phones or fashionable clothing, my grandparents invested in books, museum memberships, and educational excursions. When I was 16, I began working part-time at the local library to help with expenditures. My grandparents argued it was unnecessary, but I could see how pharmaceutical prices and property taxes were stretching their limited money. My decision to pursue law was not simply a professional choice. It was heavily affected by an incident in our neighborhood when I was a senior in high school. The Wilsons, an elderly couple, lost their entire life savings after their son persuaded them to hand over power of attorney and subsequently emptied their accounts. The helplessness, the awful betrayal they faced, tormented me. I knew right away that I needed to learn how to prevent such abuses, particularly among vulnerable elders. College and then law school were difficult, particularly when my grandparents' health began to deteriorate. Grandpa experienced cardiac problems that required many surgeries. Grandma was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. I chose a local university so that I could live at home and care for them, turning down scholarships to more prominent schools further away. During my final year of law school, I was attending classes during the day, studying at night, and fitting in medical appointments and home care in between. It was completely taxing, yet they had given so much for me. It was just what family did. The day I graduated from law school was quite bittersweet. Standing there in my cap and gown, scanning the audience, I noticed Grandpa in his wheelchair, an oxygen tank beside him, and Grandma seated next to him, occasionally seeming bewildered but always beaming broadly when our gazes met. They insisted on attending despite their health worries. "Wild horses couldn't keep us away," Grandpa said that morning, as I helped him tie his tie. My parents and Callista were obviously absent, despite being invited months in advance. Mom had texted that morning, offering some lame reason about car issues. I'd stopped expecting their presence at significant occasions in my life a long time ago, yet their absence still hurt, like a deep pain in my chest. Following the service, we dined at Grandpa's favorite Italian restaurant. He gave a shaky toast with his water glass. "To our Celine, who makes us prouder every day. The finest granddaughter, and now the finest lawyer in Massachusetts." Grandma nodded heartily, adding, "Smart as a whip, just like her grandfather." Their pleasure in my accomplishment filled me with joy and fueled my drive to live up to their trust in me. During my final semester, I took an elective course in elder law and estate planning. Given my grandparents' situation, what began as a practical choice rapidly became a passionate obsession. Professor Lysandra Vey, a former prosecutor who specializes in elder abuse cases, introduced me to the frightening reality of financial exploitation of elders, frequently by their own family members. The greatest threat to elderly individuals' financial security rarely comes from strangers, Professor Vey informed our class. 70% of elder financial abuse is perpetrated by family members or trusted caregivers. The sense of betrayal is often more devastating than the financial loss. Her comments struck a deep chord with me, freezing to the bone. I immediately started looking at protective mechanisms, notably irrevocable trusts, that may protect assets from unscrupulous family members while allowing the elderly individual to maintain control during their lifetime. With increasing worry, I began to notice alarming connections between the case studies we reviewed and my own family circumstances. 2 weeks after graduation, I scheduled a private meeting with Draven Holt, an elder law specialist whom Professor Vey had suggested. I brought copies of my grandparents' financial paperwork, which I had access to because I had helped them manage their payments. Draven examined everything attentively, her countenance getting increasingly anxious. "Your instincts are correct," she said finally. "Given the pattern of behavior you've described, and these recent inquiries from your father about property values, there is serious cause for concern. An irrevocable trust would offer significant protection, but your grandparents would need to establish it voluntarily. Have you discussed this with them?" I hadn't. Afraid they'd disregard my concerns out of loyalty to their son. That evening I mustered all of my bravery and gently broached the matter after supper. Grandpa originally reacted just as I had feared. "Garrick has many flaws, but he would never try to take our home," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "He is still my son, Celine." Grandma was quiet, twisting her wedding ring as she frequently did when nervous. "What makes you think such a thing, dear?" she finally asked. Reluctantly, I recounted all I had noticed: the increased frequency of visits whenever their health deteriorated, the incessant questioning about their assets, and the not-so-subtle suggestions that the house was too much work. Then I showed them something I had kept private, an email from Dad to a real estate agent inquiring about comparable sales in their neighborhood and the prospective market worth of their home, which I had uncovered while assisting Grandpa with his computer. Grandma began crying silently. "He borrowed $50,000 5 years ago," she told me, her voice shaking, "for a business opportunity that couldn't wait. He promised to pay it back with interest, but when your grandfather asked about it last Christmas he became angry. Said we were wealthy enough not to miss it, that we owed him for taking you in instead of him." Grandpa's face had become very pale, with the color draining from it. "Show me that trust information again," he finally concluded, his tone heavy with resignation. 3 days later, we met with Draven Holt and began the process of establishing the Morgan Family Trust. The legal process was difficult, with numerous meetings with attorneys, financial advisors, and the bank. We created the trust so that my grandparents had complete authority and profit from all assets during their lifetime. However, after their death, I would become the trustee. The property, investment portfolio, and other significant possessions were transferred to the trust, shielding them from potential claims or manipulation. Throughout the procedure, we maintained complete confidentiality. My grandparents didn't tell anyone about the arrangement, including their closest friends. I was still living with them, working at a small legal company dealing in family law, and starting my career while also caring for them. To outsiders nothing had changed, but I slept better knowing that their legacy and home were finally safe from whatever plots my parents were planning. About 6 months after we established the trust, Grandpa's health deteriorated dramatically. We thought his weariness was caused by his heart issue, but it was actually advanced stage pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim. 3 to 6 months at most. We were completely devastated. My parents learned of his diagnosis quite fast. Suddenly they began phoning daily and visiting weekly, which was completely uncommon in all of the years I had lived with my grandparents. Callista even took a leave of absence from her work at a nail salon to assist, albeit her assistance mostly consisted of searching through closets and cupboards and documenting valuable objects when she thought no one was looking. One evening, I overheard my parents talking in the garden. They assumed everyone was sleeping, but I had been up buying medication for Grandpa. "Once the old man is gone, we need to move quickly before she has time to hide anything," my dad said. "Mom is so confused these days. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her." "What about Celine?" Mom inquired, her voice tinged with dread. "She's always watching, and now she's a lawyer." "She's a brand new lawyer with student loans and no real experience," he said. "We'll offer her a small portion to keep quiet. If she makes trouble, we'll contest any will on grounds of undue influence. After all, she's been living here, dependent on them, possibly manipulating them. Who would believe her over us? The actual children." I stood frozen, the glass of water in my hand warming, as they discussed how they would sell the house, liquidate investments, and finally live the lifestyle they desired. Callista joined them, eagerly contributing her own thoughts about which antiques would garner the highest prices, and I felt violently uncomfortable. The next morning, I checked in with Draven Holt, who confirmed that all of the trust documents had been properly filed and were unquestionably valid. She reassured me that the protection was strong, but cautioned me against any attempts to have my grandma sign fresh documents after my grandfather died. As Grandpa weakened, he sensed the vultures circling. One night, as I sat with him and he battled to breathe comfortably, he grabbed my hand with unexpected power. "Promise me you will protect your grandmother and this house," the man said. "It is not just property, Celine. It is the physical embodiment of our family history, our love, our sacrifices." Garrick never understood that. He sees only dollar signs, whereas I see memories. I promised, tears flowing down my cheeks, and he nodded in satisfaction. He entered a coma 3 days later. He died quietly the next morning, with Grandma and me by his bedside. The funeral was quiet and solemn, exactly as Grandpa would have wanted. A few close friends, neighbors, and former colleagues came together to commemorate his life. My parents and Callista arrived 20 minutes late, dressed poorly for a funeral, and left immediately after the service, citing a long road ahead. Before departing, Dad grabbed me aside and directly inquired about the will and when it would be read. I gave a brief eulogy that highlighted Grandpa's honesty, calm wisdom, and unconditional love. Looking out at the modest gathering, I understood that a life well lived is defined by the love shared rather than the wealth earned. Grandpa had been extremely wealthy by that standard. Following the funeral, the reality of becoming Grandma's primary caregiver weighed heavily on me. Her dementia had been growing slowly, but grief has hastened her demise. Some days she recognized me immediately. On other days, she'd keep asking when Grandpa was coming home. Each time I had to gently remind her that he was no longer with her, watching her grief all over again. I modified my work schedule to allow me to spend more time at home, focusing on cases that could be completed remotely. I hired Thalia, a kind home health aide, to remain with Grandma when I was at work or in court. In the evenings we formed new rituals. Watching classic movies that Grandma recalled from her childhood, looking through old photo albums, and reading aloud from her favorite novels. These activities appeared to stabilize her, providing islands of clarity amid her increasingly hazy mental condition. My parents called on occasion, constantly inquiring about Grandma's health in a tone that appeared more like checking on an investment than expressing genuine care. I offered scant information each time, becoming more protective as Grandma's condition weakened. 6 months after Grandpa's death, Grandma contracted pneumonia. Despite rigorous treatment, her frail system was unable to combat the virus. Her dying days were spent peacefully at home, in her own bed, as she had desired. I read to her from Jane Austen, her favorite author, and played classical music that she and Grandpa had enjoyed. On her last night she experienced perfect lucidity. She stared at my hand and squeezed it. "Elizabeth," she said, misunderstanding me for my mother. "I am so proud of the woman you have become. So different from—" She trailed off before refocusing. "Take care of our Celine." Before I could correct her confusion, she had fallen back asleep. She never awoke again, drifting peacefully through the night, her hands still in mine. The funeral was much smaller than Grandpa's. My parents did not attend, instead sending a generic floral arrangement and a card signed by their secretary. I wasn't surprised, just saddened by my realization of their true nature. I buried my grandma next to my grandfather at the modest cemetery where generations of Morgans repose, comforted by the fact that they were finally reunited. I returned to an empty house reverberating with memories both comfortable and disturbing. For the first time, I was genuinely alone, without my grandparents, who had served as my anchors and true north. But I was also strengthened by their loving legacy and the principles they instilled in me. I would honor them by preserving what they had created and using it as they would have liked. 2 weeks after Grandma's funeral, while I was still adjusting to the house's silence and the magnitude of my loss, the doorbell rang on a Sunday morning. When I opened the door, I saw my parents and Callista waiting there, melancholy emotions carefully placed on their faces. "Oh, Celine," Mom shouted, pulling me into a stiff hug that felt more staged than genuine compassion. "We are so sorry about Mom. We came as soon as we could clear our schedules." Dad nodded solemnly. "Family needs to stick together in times like these," he remarked, patting my shoulder awkwardly before moving past me into the foyer, his gaze already fixed on the antique furnishings and artwork. Callista, a 20-year-old dressed like a teenager, gave me a short side hug. "This house is even bigger than I remembered," she said, not trying to hide her opinion of its value. I welcomed them in with politely, offering coffee and the sweets I had purchased the day before. As we gathered in the living room, the conversation followed a script I might have written ahead of time, starting with a few inquiries about Grandma's dying days and rapidly moving on to inheritance. "Have you had a chance to look through her papers?" Dad inquired, trying a casual demeanor. "I assume there's a will that needs to be probated." "I'm handling everything," I said neutrally. Her affairs were in good order. Mom leaned forward, her voice falling to what she most likely assumed was a compassionate tone. "You must be so lonely in this big house, all by herself. It's a lot for one person to maintain." "Actually, I'm managing fine," I told myself. "I love this house." "Well, of course you do, sweetie," Mom replied with a patronizing smile. "But realistically, a young woman like you should be in a modern apartment downtown, close to other young professionals. Your father and I have been thinking we could help you sell this place and find something more suitable." Dad nodded warmly. "Property values in this neighborhood are at an all-time high. It would be smart to sell now before the market shifts." "And of course," Callista said as she inspected her nail polish, "whatever comes from Grandma and Grandpa's estate should be divided fairly between family members. I mean, just because you lived with them doesn't mean you get everything, right?" Their transparency was nearly laughable. If I hadn't been so distraught and humiliated, I may have chuckled at how poorly they concealed their avarice. Instead, I just replied that I would not make any decisions concerning the house in the near future, and changed the subject. They remained for 3 days, and I found my mother looking through Grandma's jewelry box when she thought I was on a work call. My father was measuring rooms and snapping photos, ostensibly for memories. Callista was continually attempting to extract information from Thalia concerning bank accounts and safe deposit boxes. On the second evening, I strolled out onto the back porch for some fresh air and overheard my father on the phone, talking with someone about real estate valuations. "The house shows at least $3.2 million in this market," he said. "Maybe more with some updates. We just need to move quickly once we have control." Later that night, I discovered a browser window left open on Callista's laptop which had search results for challenging a trust and disputing inheritance. When I looked through the surfing history, I saw searches for local estate attorneys and methods to prove undue influence. The following morning, I confronted them gently over breakfast. "I noticed you all seem very interested in the house and Grandma's assets," I said with no emotion. "Is there something specific you're hoping to find?" Dad flushed red but immediately recovered. "Just trying to help you sort things out, honey. You have enough on your plate with your new career and all this grief?" Mom nodded vigorously. "We're just concerned about you, darling. Such responsibility for someone so young. And we want to make sure everything is fair." Callista pointed out. "Grandma and Grandpa might have been confused in their later years." I just nodded and stated I appreciated their concern, but had everything under control. They left later that day, promising to return soon to aid more. When their automobile pulled away, I called Draven Holt and informed her of the circumstances. She encouraged me to be cautious, but assured me that the trust was secure. I didn't hear from them for several weeks. I started to hope they'd accepted the situation and moved on. I was deep into a new case at work, finally establishing a routine that didn't revolve around caring, when they reappeared unexpectedly. As I was going for work, all three marched up the front way with triumphant faces. Dad was carrying a packet with documents. "Good morning, Celine," he replied, his tone tinged with feigned pity. "We hate to do this, but we need to talk about your living situation." Mom stepped forward with a strained smile. "We found some papers in our safe deposit box. An older will that your grandparents signed years ago, leaving everything to your father as their only child." "We had it verified by an attorney," Callista said excitedly. "We also have papers showing the house has been signed over to Dad. The trust you think protects everything. Apparently not valid when there's a prior will." Dad extended the folder toward me. "We're not unreasonable. We'll give you until Friday to pack your belongings. We've already found a buyer for the house." I glanced at their smug expressions and the folder containing what I was sure were bogus documents and felt a strange peace settle over me. "You really think I would let that happen?" I murmured gently. Their confidence wavered briefly, but Dad immediately recovered. "This is happening whether you like it or not. Friday, Celine. Be out by noon." When they turned to leave, I called after them. "Before you do anything irrevocable, you might want to consult a better lawyer. One who knows the difference between a genuine will and a fabrication." Dad's face clouded. "Don't threaten me, young lady. You're not the only one who knows about the law." With that final shot, they fled, completely certain in their victory. When my family left with their threats and phony documents, I went into action. My legal training kicked in, as did the powerful protective impulses that my grandparents had instilled in me. It was no longer simply about the inheritance. It was about keeping my vow to maintain my grandparents' legacy, while also standing up to years of manipulation and entitlement. First, I called Calum Ward, my firm's top litigator and fraud specialist. "Can you come over tonight?" I inquired. "My family is trying to steal my grandparents' estate with forged documents. They're giving me until Friday to vacate." Calum arrived within an hour, accompanied by his paralegal. I put out everything: the trust documents, my grandparents' medical certificates demonstrating they were competent to sign, the diary I'd kept scrupulously chronicling my parents' suspicious behavior, and my memory of the bogus claims they'd just made. "If what they showed you is what I think it is, they are committing several felonies," Calum stated, his demeanor severe. "Forgery, fraud, attempted theft by deception. But we need to see those documents to be certain." My next call went to Draven Holt, who had helped form the trust. "They're making their move," I informed her. "And it's as brazen as we feared." Draven remained reassuringly quiet. "The trust is ironclad, Celine, but we should file for an emergency injunction to prevent any recording of fraudulent deeds or transfers. I'll draft it tonight and file first thing tomorrow." As my legal team prepared, I moved to actual security measures. I called a locksmith, and he arrived that afternoon to change all of the locks in the house. Next, I hired a security company to install cameras at all entrances. By evening, the house was secure from unauthorized intrusion. I called my bank one last time to confirm that all accounts had been secured and reported for odd behavior. The bank manager, who had known my grandparents for decades, was shocked by my position and personally set alerts on everything related to the estate. As night fell, I organized all of the trust's documents, making numerous copies and storing them in various locations. One in my house safe, another with Calum, a third with Draven, and digital versions encrypted in cloud storage. No single point of failure might jeopardize our security. That evening, as I was evaluating everything, my phone started ringing non-stop with calls from my parents and Callista. I let them all go to voicemail. The texts began gently, with Dad recommending we speak it out like adults, but gradually escalated into explicit threats. "You have no idea who you are messing with," was my father's final voicemail. "And you will respect me. That house and money are rightfully mine, and I will have them one way or another." The next morning, I met with a bigger legal team led by Calum and Draven. Mireille Duval, a specialist in estate litigation, examined our documentation and approach. "Their claim about a prior will taking precedence over the trust is completely without merit," she informed me. "Once assets are transferred into an irrevocable trust, they are no longer part of the estate to be distributed by will. Any competent lawyer would know this, which suggests they either have a very bad attorney or, more likely, no legitimate attorney at all." We devised a multifaceted strategy. First, an injunction prohibiting any property transfers. Second, a cease and desist letter questioning their bogus claims. And third, preparation for a possible lawsuit for harassment and attempted fraud if they persisted. "What about the documents they claim to have?" I asked them. "The supposed earlier will and property transfer? If they attempt to file those anywhere, we will immediately challenge them as fraudulent," Mireille told me. "We have substantial evidence of your grandparents' intentions through the properly executed trust. Plus we have their medical records showing they were mentally competent, the ongoing journal you kept, and witnesses like Thalia who can testify to their clear wishes." While the legal team worked, I began gathering information regarding my parents' history of financial impropriety through diligent study and contacts from law school. I documented my father's 2 bankruptcies, a tax lien, and a small claims judgment against my mother for a failed business venture in which she received investments but never produced anything. By Thursday afternoon, my family's desperation was evident. Callista wrote a rambling letter on social media, saying that I had misled our sick grandparents and stolen the family legacy. She tagged extended family members and elderly neighbors, in an attempt to rouse public opinion against me. My parents adopted a more direct approach, showing up to my law practice unexpectedly, and wanting to talk with me. When the receptionist stated that I was in court, they refused to go, raising such a scene that security had to remove them out. My coworkers were stunned but extremely supportive. The incident simply increased their determination to assist me. Later that day, I discovered from a worried neighbor that my father had been going door to door on my street, informing people that I was mentally unwell and soliciting community support for their seizure of the property. Fortunately, most neighbors had known my grandparents and me for years and were wary of these unexpected, anxious relatives they had rarely seen. As Friday approached, I prepared for every eventuality. Calum would join me at the house, along with Draven and a notary public, to observe any contacts. Thalia would also be present, prepared to testify on my grandparents' mental health and stated wishes if necessary. I contacted the local police, outlining the circumstances, and asked that they be prepared to respond if my family attempted forced entrance or caused a disturbance. The officer I spoke with took comprehensive notes and promised to flag the location for swift action. Finally, I installed legal recording devices in the main rooms of the house to ensure that any confrontations were documented. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for recordings, however I posted obvious signs informing all entrants that audio and video recording was taking place, which satisfied the notification requirement. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep because my mind was racing with scenarios. But beneath the fear lay a foundation of certainty. I was doing exactly what my ancestors would have wanted. Safeguarding the home they had lovingly preserved for generations from people who saw it solely as a source of income. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would confront it with the courage and integrity they had instilled in me. Friday morning dawned sunny and bright. A wonderful spring day that entirely contradicted the storm developing in my household affairs. I awoke early after a sleepless night, showered, and dressed carefully in a professional blue suit, instinctively reaching for the pearl earrings Grandma had given me for my law school graduation. For important days, she had stated, this surely qualifies. My support team had arrived by 8:30. Calum arrived first, bringing coffee and a calming confidence. We have everything covered legally, he told me. Today is just about standing your ground. Draven then arrived with the notary public, Octavia, a somber woman who had watched hundreds of property disputes. Thalia arrived shortly after, giving me a motherly hug before taking up position in the kitchen, where she began stress baking, the aroma of cinnamon buns quickly filling the house. Mireille Duval completed our team by delivering copies of the emergency injunction obtained by the court the previous day, which prohibited the registration of any property transfers relating to the estate. Just in case they try to go directly to the registry of deeds, she told me. We positioned ourselves strategically. My family and I would meet on the front porch, which served as a metaphorical threshold for them to cross. The rest would stay inside, out of sight, but ready to go forward if necessary. The folder with the pertinent trust paperwork, the injunction, and documentation of the estate's protected status sat on the tiny table opposite the porch swing, providing a visual counterbalance to whatever bogus papers my family could present. At 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before their self-imposed deadline for my eviction, a black SUV came up to the curb. Behind it was a big moving truck, its engine roaring as it double-parked on the tight roadway. Several neighbors interrupted their gardening to witness the spectacle. My father was the first to emerge from the SUV, dressed in what he most likely thought was excellent business attire. A slightly too tight suit with sparkling cufflinks. My mother followed, her face set in grim determination, fashionable sunglasses covering her eyes. Callista came out last, virtually bouncing with excitement, phone in hand, as if eager to film her victory. Behind them, two men came off from the moving truck, visibly uncomfortable as they sensed the tension. My father waved them forward, impatiently. I stood up carefully from the porch swing, holding the folder in my hand, and waited. Allow them to come to me on my territory, the home that my grandparents had given to me. Right on time to witness your departure, I see, my father said as they neared the front walk. I hope you're packed and ready to go. He waved the packet he was carrying, which likely contained his false documents. As they approached, I stood erect on the porch steps, remaining silent. Several neighbors had crept closer, sensing drama and possibly afraid for my safety. We brought a truck to help with your things, my mother continued in a deceptively pleasant manner intended to convey a sense of familial concern to the onlookers. We know this must be difficult. As they approached the bottom of the porch stairs, I finally spoke. Before you come any further, I should inform you that this property is under video and audio surveillance, and there are witnesses inside the house. Anything you say or do is being recorded. That caused them to pause for a second. My father recovered first, his grin tightening. Always the dramatic one, Celine. This doesn't change anything. We have legal documents giving us ownership of this property. He waved his folder again. You mean your forged documents? I inquired quietly. The ones that supposedly override an irrevocable trust established over a year ago, when both my grandparents were alive and legally competent. My mother's smile wavered. Callista stared uncertainly at her parents, the script clearly not going as intended. My father's expression clouded as he ascended the first two steps. Now you listen here. This house belongs to me. My parents wanted me to have it. Whatever you tricked them into signing when they were sick doesn't change that. When the front door opened behind me, Calum stepped out, followed by Draven, Murray, Octavia the notary, and Thalia. My father was taken aback when he saw 5 individuals who were clearly professional and well prepared. "Mr. Morgan," Calum replied with a smile. "I am Calum Ward, attorney for the Morgan Family Trust. I believe you were just about to accuse your daughter of fraud and undue influence. Please continue. We are recording for the court." My father's mouth opened and closed silently. My mother grabbed his arm and whispered urgently. The moving truck men moved uneasily, with one checking his watch. "Perhaps you should inform the movers that they will not be needed today," I said quietly. "Or any day." My father finally found his voice and said, "This is ridiculous. I have a legal right to this property. I have documentation right here." He waved the folder again, but made no attempt to open it. Murray walked forward, her professional manner unflappable. "As counsel for the estate, I must inform you that we have obtained an emergency injunction preventing any recording of fraudulent property transfers related to this estate." She held out a copy of the court order. "Additionally, I should warn you that presenting forged documents is a felony in Massachusetts, punishable by up to 5 years in prison." My father's face lost its color. My mother stepped forward, taking a different approach. "Celine, honey, there has clearly been a misunderstanding. We only want what is best for the family. Perhaps we can discuss this privately, without all these people." "There is nothing to discuss," I stated firmly. "Grandma and Grandpa established the Morgan Family Trust to protect their assets and legacy. All properties and investments are held by the trust, which I manage as the designated trustee. This was their choice, made freely while they were alive and well. Any documents you have claiming otherwise are fraudulent." My father's irritability bubbled over. "This is not over, Celine. I am your father. That counts for something legally. I will fight this to the Supreme Court if necessary. I will make sure everyone knows how you manipulated 2 elderly people. Your reputation will be ruined." Calum moved forward again. "Mr. Morgan, are you threatening to file frivolous lawsuits and engage in defamation, because that would constitute harassment and possibly extortion? Should I add that to the record?" The moving truck driver approached with caution. "Sir, we're on the clock here. Are we moving anything or not?" My father ignored him, his face distorted with anger. "You ungrateful little. After everything we have done for you." I couldn't hold back a quick, astonished laugh. "Everything you have done for me? You abandoned me when I was 5 years old. Grandma and Grandpa raised me, loved me, taught me everything important about life and family. You showed up only when you needed money or thought there was something to gain." The bare truth hovered in the air between us. Callista too appeared embarrassed, with her phone dropped and no longer capturing the humiliating scene. "I have something else you should hear," I added, taking out my phone. I played the recording I had taken of their chat in the yard during Grandpa's final days, their voices clear as they plotted to use Grandma's bewilderment and completely block me out. My mother gave a gasp. My father's face turned an awful purple. "That is illegal," he muttered. "You cannot record people without their knowledge." "Actually," Draven interrupted, "Massachusetts law permits recording if the person recording is a party to the conversation or has consent from a party. Celine was present and consented to her own recording. Perfectly legal." Several police officers had arrived by this point, in response to calls from worried neighbors about the increasing confrontation. As they neared, my father seemed to realize the hopelessness of his position. "This is not over," he growled as he backed down the stairs. "Family should not treat family this way." "On that, we completely agree," I said softly. The cops inquired whether there was a problem. I briefly mentioned that my family had made false assumptions regarding property ownership, but that everything was under control. My legal team supplied more information by giving the officers the trust documents and the injunction. Defeated but undeterred, my parents and sister returned to their SUV. The moving truck drove away, its job unfulfilled. As they drove away, I felt no triumph, only deep regret for what family should have been, but never was in my situation. Thalia gripped my shoulder. "Your grandparents would be very proud," she added softly. "So very proud." Standing on the porch my grandfather had constructed, surrounded by people who had showed more concern and loyalty than my biological relations, I realized she was correct. It had never been about money or property. It had been about honoring the genuine meaning of family and keeping the promises we make to those we care about. Following the incident on the porch, numerous practical problems needed to be addressed. Calum completed the necessary papers to establish a permanent record of the trust's legitimacy and my role as trustee. Draven assisted me in obtaining further legal protection against potential future problems. The local police, already familiar with the situation, increased patrols past the house for several weeks. Most surprisingly, the district attorney's office approached me about filing charges for attempted fraud and forgery. Despite my family's activities, I decided not to seek criminal charges against them. Not because of residual affection, but because I knew my grandparents would have preferred that I take the high road. The DA supported my decision, but he kept the case open just in case. For several months I lived with chronic anxiety, leaping at unexpected sounds and frequently monitoring security camera feeds. My parents attempted a couple more contacts, swinging between threats of unending litigation and heartfelt calls to family devotion. When it became evident that the trust was truly unbreakable and that I had substantial evidence of their false objectives, the correspondence ceased immediately. Living alone in the house that had formerly been filled with my grandparents' love and wisdom was both comforting and painful. Every room contained memories. Grandpa reading in his favorite chair by the fireplace, Grandma humming in the kitchen as she cooked Sunday supper, and the two of them dancing slowly to old records in the living room while they thought I was upstairs studying. The silence was occasionally unbearable. I found myself talking aloud to them, asking for advice or simply sharing my day, just as I did when they were still living. Sometimes I imagined hearing Grandpa's deep chuckle or smelling Grandma's perfume. Grief, I realized, does not take a straight route. It returns unexpectedly, prompted by a familiar sound or the change of seasons. Recognizing that I needed help processing what had happened, I began visiting Dr. Ira Vaughn, a grieving and family trauma therapist. Her patient questioning helped me untangle the complicated emotions. Grief for my grandparents, rage at my parents, betrayal, guilt for occasionally wishing for a normal family, and a profound loneliness that appeared to have no bottom. What you are experiencing is complicated grief, Dr. Vaughn remarked during one session. You are not only mourning your grandparents, but also the loss of the idea of family as it should be. That is a significant double loss. Working with Mary taught me to divorce my parents' conduct from my own worth. To understand that their avarice and manipulation were a reflection of their character defects, not my own failures. Most significantly, I realized that family is defined not only by blood, but also by love, respect, and mutual care. My legal company partners provided unexpected help. Calum and his wife, Elowen, welcomed me to holiday dinners. Mireille checked in on a frequent basis with coffee and discussion. Even the generally reticent senior partners demonstrated their care by mentoring and participating in crucial cases. Around 6 months after the confrontation, I took the difficult decision to renovate parts of the house. Not to eliminate my grandparents' presence, but to incorporate their legacy into my own destiny. I preserved Grandpa's library, complete with his volumes and beautiful leather chair, but turned an empty bedroom into a modern home office. Grandma's kitchen stayed mostly unaltered, though I did add modern equipment that she would have enjoyed using. The most major impact occurred when I founded the Aldrich and Isolde Morgan Scholarship Fund at my law school, which supports students interested in elder law and the protection of vulnerable groups. Using a portion of the trust's assets in this manner felt fitting, as it continued their generous spirits while also creating something positive from our family's tragic history. My working life has evolved as well. Based on my personal experience, I refocused my legal practice only on elder law and estate planning. Working with families to establish trusts and protective measures to prevent the type of exploitation my parents attempted became extremely rewarding. Each customer protected seemed like a modest win, a positive rippling effect of my grandparents' wise decision to form our trust. Slowly, I formed a new kind of family around me. Thalia continued to pay regular visits, now as a friend rather than an employee. My neighbors, who had witnessed the drama on my doorstep, grew closer and invited me to block parties and community gatherings. I joined a book group that met monthly, and I found connection via sharing stories, just like I had with my grandparents. 2 years after our argument on the porch, I received a little envelope in the mail with no return address. Callista left a tiny letter inside saying, "I apologize for what happened. They were wrong. I was mistaken. I miss you." There was no request for money, no mention of the property or estate, only a simple acknowledgement, and what appeared to be sincere regret. After much thought, I responded with an equally simple note. "Thank you for mentioning that. It matters." I did not initiate more contact, but did leave the door slightly ajar. It was unclear what would happen next, but the exchange felt like a small step toward healing, if not reconciliation. I've had no touch with my folks since that day. Sometimes I see their names in my email spam folder, or I get a missed call from an unknown number that could be theirs. I have accepted that we will never have a healthy relationship. That acceptance, however terrible it was to achieve, has been liberating. And the most deep lesson of this journey has been that family does not guarantee affection or loyalty. True family, whether by blood or by choice, must be founded on respect, honesty, and true caring. My grandparents taught me the true meaning of family. In their absence, I've discovered new ways to commemorate their legacy by forming my own chosen family of friends and mentors. I still perch on the porch swing some evenings, especially in spring when Grandma's garden blooms. The house doesn't feel empty anymore, but rather full of memories and fresh possibilities. My grandparents established a trust that secured more than simply their possessions. It provided a base on which I could rebuild and flourish following loss. For anyone dealing with comparable family and inheritance issues, my advice is straightforward. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And remember that protecting yourself from exploitation honors those who actually loved you. Standing up to those who would exploit the vulnerable is not selfish. It is an act of bravery and integrity. My relatives shut me out for 8 years. Then they lined up at my mansion, begging for help. I let them in, gave the tour, and finally kicked them out. If you've ever been regarded as the family's cautionary tale, only to have those same people circle back the moment you achieve, you'll understand why last Sunday morning altered everything. I was in my garage working on a custom motorbike build when my Ring doorbell rang. Sunday morning, 9 a.m., and there's a line of folks on my front porch. At first I assumed it was a religious gathering or something, but as I checked the app, my blood ran cold. 7 members of my family stood there as if they owned the area, having said no more than 2 words to me in the previous decade. My grandmother Margaret, Aunt Laura, Uncle Daniel, cousins Jason and Lucas and older brother Leonard were with a blonde I'd never seen before. I'm Albert, 35, and seeing these folks on my land was like finding rodents in your kitchen. For reference, my house is not a typical suburban design. It's a 4,500 square foot custom home on 5 acres outside Austin, replete with a 4-car garage, workshop, and enough space that I can't see my neighbors. The kind of place that cost me 7 figures yet was completely worth it. My first instinct was to disregard them. These were the same individuals who had excluded me from family events for a decade because I chose to create my own construction company rather than follow their safe corporate career path. But something about their body language, the way they were all gathered together and appeared nervous, piqued my curiosity. The security cameras had seen them arriving in 2 vehicles. Leonard's beat-up Honda Civic, which had seen better days, and what appeared to be a rental car, which Uncle Daniel would most likely have to pay for somehow. They'd been standing there for about 5 minutes before ringing the bell, apparently gathering up their nerve. I watched them whisper amongst themselves while using the app. Grandmother Margaret adjusted her handbag several times as if she were prepared for fight. To understand why this visit was so memorable, consider how we arrived. Growing up in a working-class family in Houston, I was the odd one out. My father, Charles, was a shift supervisor at a chemical facility. My mother, Helen, worked part-time in a dentist clinic. They were wonderful people, but they had a limited definition of success: college, corporate job, suburbs, retirement with a pension. My brother Leonard was their golden boy. Straight A's, football team captain, full scholarship to the University of Texas for business. I, on the other hand, was the kid who disassembled lawnmowers in the garage and made tree houses that looked like they came from a magazine. While Leonard studied for finals, I learned welding on YouTube and built unique furniture in shop class. The treatment we received was completely different. When Leonard returned home with his report card, it was time to celebrate. Dinner at his favorite restaurant, calling relatives to gloat about his accomplishments. When I brought home something I'd made in the wood shop, a jewelry box for my mother's birthday that took me 3 weeks to complete, the reaction was always the same. "That's great, honey. Did you complete your algebra homework?" Every Sunday, we would go to Grandmother Margaret's place for dinner. She dominated the family with an iron fist, and her favorite topic was comparing the grandchildren to one another. Leonard was always a success story. My cousins, Jason and Lucas, were figuring out their paths, which included messing around in community college, while I was the creative one. Code for future disappointment. The hierarchy was established early, and has never changed. Leonard had a wonderful seat at supper next to Grandmother Margaret, where he could tell everyone about his academic accomplishments. Even when I was 16 and 17, I was always wedged in between younger cousins at the kids' end of the table. The entire extended family had an obsession with appearances. Aunt Laura married Uncle Daniel, who worked in middle management at an insurance company, and they pretended he was some sort of business magnate. They lived in a decent suburban home and drove leased cars that they couldn't afford. They did, however, contribute to its success. Their social media posts were meticulously designed to include fancy dinners, vacation images, and modest boasts about promotions and raises. I was 17 years old when the cracks appeared. Leonard was finishing his sophomore year at UT, getting high grades, and dating someone our parents adored. Meanwhile, I was getting in problems at school. Not for anything horrible, just for missing school and working construction jobs under the table. As a high school student, I earned more money working weekends than most people in our family made in a month. I wasn't earning simply pocket change. I was earning $800 to $1,000 per weekend doing framing, concrete pours, and finishing carpentry. By senior year, I had saved $15,000, more than my parents had in their emergency fund. Instead of being proud, they felt humiliated. When neighbors inquired about my weekend occupations, my mother would swiftly divert the subject or make excuses about me helping a family member. When I told my parents I wasn't going to college, it was as if I had joined a gang. The conflicts were spectacular. Dad threatened to kick me out. Mom cried, calling me selfish and ungrateful. But the family's reaction was far worse. At Leonard's graduation party, Grandmother Margaret stopped me beside the BBQ pit and said, "Albert, this construction phase needs to stop. You are embarrassing the family. Leonard has a real future. You're simply playing with tools." That chat lasted 20 minutes, and she went over all the ways I was disappointing the family. She brought up my cousin Aaron, who had attended community college and now works at a bank. She highlighted family friends whose children are pursuing respectable jobs in education and nursing. She even likened me to my neighbor's son who had enlisted in the military. At least it was respectable service rather than hard labor. That's when I realized I was done trying to fit within their small box. I moved out the next week, got a job with Ramirez Construction, and began studying the company from the ground up. While Leonard partied his way through his final 2 years of college, I studied every element of the construction industry. My first flat was a studio above a garage, which I rented from one of my crew members. It wasn't much, 400 square feet with a hot plate and a little fridge. But it was mine. I outfitted it with items I made myself and felt more at ease there than I had in my childhood bedroom. The family's attitude became evident rather quickly. At family gatherings, they'd ask Leonard about his internships and employment prospects with real curiosity. When they spoke to me, they asked polite questions about my handiwork and suggested that I return to school for something more secure. The condescension was subtle but consistent. Uncle Daniel would pat me on the shoulder and say things like, "Well, somebody's got to do the physical work, right?" Aunt Laura would ask whether I was still doing construction, as if it was a pastime I'd ultimately grow out of. Cousins Jason and Lucas, who were barely passing their community college classes, would joke that I was the family's hired muscle. I reached my breaking point at the age of 23. My brother Leonard had secured a mid-level accounting job at $45,000 per year, which the family treated as if he had won the lottery. Meanwhile, I've recently founded Rodriguez Construction with 2 of my crew members, armed with a $25,000 loan on my truck and all of my cash. Starting my own business was not a whim. I'd been with Ramirez Construction for 5 years, where I learned everything there was to know about bidding, project management, permits, and supplier relationships. My supervisor was grooming me to take over, but I was too impatient to start something on my own. Those first several months were terrifying, sleeping on invoices, hoping clients would pay on time, handling everything from accounting to cleaning up myself. But we were seeing results. Our first significant project was remodeling a 1920s home, and the before and after images spread around town. At Christmas dinner, I made the terrible mistake of attempting to share my success. I'd just gotten a $380,000 custom home contract, my biggest project yet. When I brought it up, hoping for some family support, the reaction was nasty. "That's nice, Albert." Aunt Laura spoke, scarcely looking up from her phone. "What happens if the construction market crashes?" "Leonard has job security," Uncle Daniel said, nodding. "Construction is boom and bust, kid. You should think about getting your real estate license or something more reliable." What followed was a masterclass in backhanded compliments and worry trolling. They questioned my company concept, inquired about my insurance coverage, and claimed I was risky. Meanwhile, Leonard sat there smiling as everyone applauded his wise professional decision. But Grandmother Margaret dealt the fatal blow. "Albert, playing contractor is okay for now. But when are you going to settle down and get serious? Leonard has even mentioned buying a house with Emily. You're still living in that flat, working with your hands like a laborer." The word laborer was spoken in the same tone as criminal. At that point, I recognized these individuals would never respect what I achieved, no matter how successful I became. The irony was thick. Leonard's steady position paid less than I was earning working for someone else, and my new firm was on schedule to make $400,000 in its first year. I departed early that night and did not look back. The last straw came at Leonard's engagement party. By then, my company was generating $600,000 per year, and I was earning approximately $180,000. I volunteered to help with the costs. The response: "Thanks, but we've got it covered. Maybe just bring a nice gift." At the party I sat with family acquaintances I'd never met before, while Leonard's college colleagues sat at the main family table. Leonard thanked everyone who had supported him throughout his speech, including his boss, professors, and even school buddies. 8 minutes of appreciation to everyone who had influenced his life, and I wasn't worth a single line. That's when I stopped trying. If they wanted to pretend I did not exist, I would make it simple for them. The following 5 years were the most focused of my life. Rodriguez Construction grew from 3 people driving a truck to 20 full-time employees with equipment worth more than most people's homes. I specialized in high-end custom builds and commercial projects, the type for which clients do not inquire about price because they understand that quality costs money. By 28, I was earning in the mid-6 figures per year, but I kept it quiet, drove the same F-250 work truck, lived in a decent apartment, and reinvested money in the firm. My family had no idea what I was doing. When I came into extended family around town, they'd inquire how the construction was going, with the same dismissive tone. Meanwhile, Leonard's suburban fantasy was collapsing. Word spreads in small circles. He had a large home, auto bills, credit card debt, and an expensive wife with no income. Around 2018, Austin had a significant real estate boom, and my life changed dramatically. Suddenly, every successful business owner desired custom homes, and they all preferred the builder who built quality without sacrificing corners. In 6 months, I got 3 contracts totaling more than $2 million. These weren't your typical projects. A 6,000-foot modern farmhouse for a software entrepreneur, a historic downtown building conversion, and a custom workshop for a rare automobile collector. Each assignment challenged my abilities while also fostering relationships with clients who became repeat customers and referral sources. That's when I purchased 5 acres of hill country and began planning my own home. Not to brag, but because I wanted to create something that would last. The design process took months. A historic appearance with all modern conveniences, meant to last generations. Custom millwork, imported tiling, and commercial-grade everything. The garage was organized like a professional shop. The office overlooked my own man-made lake. By 2020, I was worth millions on paper. Rodriguez Construction was booked solid for 18 months. I had employees earning more than most college grads. But to my family, I was still just Albert, who worked in construction. The loneliness did not worry me. I'd made lasting friendships with other company owners, artisans, and customers. Real relationships are built on mutual respect rather than family obligation. When my crew needed assistance, we all looked out for one another. My electrician's house flooded, so we spent the weekend reconstructing his basement for free. I dated but never went serious, especially after witnessing Leonard's marriage fall apart when Emily left him for a lawyer amid his firm's downsizing. I had other things to do than play such games. They say that living well is the best form of payback. While my family was confined in their suburban bubble, defining success based on appearances and social position, I was creating something tangible. Every morning I wake up on my own property, in a home I designed and built, surrounded by work that will outlast me. And you know what? It took them 3 years to realize I was gone. When CO struck, construction was deemed necessary. So, while everyone else was on lockdown, I was busier than ever. People who remained at home desired improvements, expansions, and custom offices. I established a second crew and began working on commercial projects for firms to adjust to the new reality. The pandemic provided chances I had not anticipated. Restaurants needed outdoor seating created rapidly. Office buildings needed to be modified for spacing. Families that worked from home desired dedicated office spaces, home gyms, and outside recreation areas. My company pivoted faster than others because we were always adaptive. While large construction companies were bogged down in paperwork and change orders, we could bid on a project on Monday and begin work on Wednesday. Clients were willing to pay a premium for that kind of attentiveness. By 2021, I was generating several $1 million in annual revenue and earning a substantial personal income. I bought a new truck, some investment buildings, and began considering extending into Dallas and San Antonio. The investment properties were a strategic decision. I purchased distressed properties in good neighborhoods, renovated them with my own crews during slow periods, and either sold them or maintained them as rentals. It was a logical extension of my building experience, and it provided a variety of income streams that were not entirely based on new construction projects. When cousin Jason's girlfriend spotted my truck at a petrol station, she recognized me. She followed me on a social media platform that I rarely used but that included a few photographs of my work. Next thing I know, family members are looking through my posts, seeing photographs of my house, my equipment, and the high-end projects I was uploading. My account was mostly a business tool. Before and after photographs of projects, shots of the staff at work, and the occasional image of a finished place. However, someone who knew me saw it as a clear picture of success. The projects were clearly high-end. The equipment was of the highest quality, and the work was undeniably good. After years of stillness, I started receiving strange texts. "Hey Albert, hope you're doing well. Saw your post about that mansion you built. Looks incredible. We should catch up soon." The communications were clearly false. Jason, who hadn't spoken to me in 6 years, suddenly wanted to get coffee and catch up. Lucas made a buddy request after avoiding me since high school. Aunt Laura even began appreciating my business posts, which was ironic given that she had spent years warning everyone that I was squandering my life. I disregarded them all. If they wanted to reconnect because they learned I had money, that told me everything I needed to know about their motives. But I had no idea they were preparing an ambush. Steel-toed boots echoed through the entryway as I walked to the front door. When I opened it, the expressions on their faces were wonderful. They were expecting the family failure they had been discussing for years. Instead, they got a 6'2" guy in shape, dressed in a good flannel and jeans that fit. "Albert," Grandmother Margaret said first, her voice trying to sound pleasant but coming over stiff. "What a beautiful home you have." "Yeah, well, hard work pays off," I said, not bothering to hide the sharpness in my voice. The quiet stretched on like a bad first date, until Aunt Laura stepped forward with a phony smile. "We were in town for the Johnson family reunion. Do you remember the Johnsons? We thought we'd stop by because we heard you lived out here." The casual mention almost made me laugh. These people hadn't cared where I lived for 10 years, and now they were acting like we were close. The Johnsons lived 2 hours away, so this wasn't exactly a casual stop by. "How thoughtful," I said, my voice flat. "Do you want to come in, or are we having this conversation on the porch?" The entryway alone probably cost more than most people's annual salary. Custom wrought iron chandelier, imported stone flooring with radiant heating, solid walnut staircase with hand-forged railings. They filed past me into the foyer, and I watched their eyes widen. Vaulted ceilings, custom ironwork, original art on the walls. Cousin Jason couldn't contain himself. "Man, Albert, this place is great. What did this cost you?" "More than you make in 3 years," I replied without missing a beat. I gave them the full tour because I wanted to see their reactions. The living room with 20-foot ceilings and a custom stone fireplace. The kitchen with professional-grade appliances and a center island larger than most people's bedrooms. And the office, which was adorned with awards and photos from luxury projects. Jason kept making low whistles. Lucas was taking pictures for his girlfriend, which meant documenting everything for later sharing. Leonard's new wife was calculating property values in her head, but Grandmother Margaret's reaction told me the most. She was reevaluating everything she thought she knew about me, and the grandson she'd written off as a failure was clearly more successful than anyone else in the family. And the real reason reveals itself. We ended up in the living room with coffee and pastries, small talk about the weather, their drive out, safe topics that avoided the elephant in the room. I answered their questions about the house and business with just enough detail to make them understand the size of what I'd built. The living room was designed for entertaining, with a seating area that could comfortably accommodate 15 people. The fireplace was faced with stone I'd quarried from the property, and the mantel was a single piece of mesquite that I'd had milled and finished by hand. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided views of the lake and the landscaped grounds. Aunt Laura cleared her throat, signaling that we were approaching the true purpose of their visit. "Albert, we've been thinking about family lately," she began, using that delicate voice that made my skin crawl. "Leonard's going through some financial difficulties with the divorce settlement and legal fees." The setup was there, and I kept my expression neutral while waiting for the pitch. "Legal fees?" I asked, playing dumb. Leonard looked uncomfortable, but Laura pressed on. "The custody struggle with Emily has been costly. She hired one of those high-end divorce attorneys, and you know how complicated these things can be. Emily was seeking alimony, claiming she had sacrificed her career to support Leonard's advancement, despite the fact that she had never had a career to sacrifice. I had been hearing about Leonard's divorce from mutual acquaintances for months, so I knew how messy things could get. Uncle Daniel jumped in. "Actually, Albert, I've been researching investment prospects in the building industry. With your knowledge and connections, we could certainly put together something profitable for the entire family." I had to give them credit for inventiveness. Rather than asking for money directly, they framed it as a business opportunity and family support. But I could read between the lines. Leonard needed money, and they decided that his successful brother should provide it. The investment opportunity angle was especially insulting, as these people who had never shown interest in my business when it was struggling, were now eager to become partners now that it was successful. They wanted to bypass the years of long days, financial risk, and developing relationships with suppliers and clients. Grandmother Margaret made what she felt was the final argument. "We've missed having you at family gatherings, Albert. It's time to put the past behind us and start acting like a family again. After all, family looks out for one another." After 10 years of treating me as an embarrassment, they were now ready to welcome me back into the family, as long as I brought my checkbook. I leaned back in my leather chair and studied their faces, remembering how they had written me off when I was struggling to build something from nothing. Now that I had exceeded their expectations, they wanted to be family again. "That's fascinating," I responded calmly. "Remind me, when was the last family event I was invited to?" The stillness was deafening, and they all looked at each other, hoping someone else would respond. "Well," Laura finally responded. "You know how it is with busy schedules and everything." "No," I said. "I'm not sure how it is." "Why aren't you telling me?" They'd come here expecting the old Albert, the one who desperately needed their acceptance and would do anything to belong. But they were about to learn that version of me existed in the past. Leonard finally found his voice. "Albert, I know we haven't been as close as we should have been." "Close?" I interrupted. "I haven't received a phone call, text message, birthday card or holiday present from anyone in this room in over 8 years. You got married twice and did not tell me. My grandmother told people that I was a construction worker who would never amount to anything. And now you want to discuss getting close?" Their cheeks paled as the comfy fantasy they'd been living with, that our separation was somehow mutual, was shattered by realities they couldn't refute. Jason attempted to play peacemaker. "Hey man, maybe we all could have done better at staying in touch." "Remaining in touch?" I stood up, my full height, making them all look up at me. "Let me tell you about remaining in touch. When I first started my business, I called Dad to tell him about my first major contract. Are you aware of what he said?" "That's nice, son. Leonard was recently promoted to senior accountant. When I bought this land and began building, I sent Mom pictures because I was proud of what I'd accomplished. She presented them to people and said that I was still playing with tools." The room was dead silent, and the clock in the corner appeared to have stopped ticking. "When Leonard got engaged the first time," I said, "I offered to help pay for the wedding. Laura here informed me that they have it covered. But thanks anyhow." At the reception, I was seated with strangers, while Leonard's pals sat at the family table. When he gave his speech thanking everyone who had helped him achieve, he included his teachers, his boss, and even his friends, but not his brother who had offered to assist. Leonard looked down at his hands. "Albert, I'm not done," I said, my voice firmer. "When Grandmother Margaret underwent heart surgery 5 years ago, I drove to the hospital with flowers and promises to pay her medical fees. The nurse informed me that visits were only for direct family members. When I mentioned that I was her grandson, Laura here told the staff that I was simply distant family and that I should wait. The nurse was perplexed because I clearly knew family details, but Laura insisted I wait until after the immediate family had visited, so I ended up spending 4 hours in the hospital cafeteria, waiting for permission to see my own grandmother. I had driven hours after receiving word about grandmother's surgery, bringing flowers and a card with a check to help with expenses, and instead of being welcomed, I was turned away like a stranger. When I finally got 5 minutes with her, she was groggy and barely acknowledged my presence. I left the check with Laura, who never mentioned whether grandmother even knew about it. Grandmother Margaret's face was white as a sheet. The reality of how they treated me was laid out in detail, and there was no way to spin it. "So no," I responded, settling back down. "We haven't been as close as we should have been. You completely shut me out of this family, and now that you know I am more successful than all of you together, you want to be family again. That is not family. That is a transaction." Leonard's wife, who had been quiet, decided to speak out. "Look, Albert," she said, standing up with a confident tilt to her chin. "I'm not sure what occurred between you guys in the past. And frankly, I don't care. What I care about is that Leonard has been struggling financially since his divorce. But you clearly have more money than you know what to do with. Family helps family. Period. I mean, look at this place." She motioned around the room. "You're definitely loaded. Leonard is your brother. and he needs help. It's not like you earned it all on your own. You were fortunate to secure several construction contracts during the boom. The least you could do is support the family that reared you." I stared at her for a long time, contemplating the utter boldness of what she had just said, before breaking into a deep, real chuckle that made everyone in the room shift. "What makes it so funny?" she questioned, her cheeks burning. "You," I murmured, wiping my eyes, "are exactly what I was expecting." Leonard always had a type. Pretty, entitled, and entirely oblivious of how the real world operates. "Albert," Grandmother Margaret snapped. I ignored her and concentrated on the blonde. "What's your name again?" "Vanessa," she said, lifting her chin. "Brittany, can you tell me what you do for work?" "I'm a social media influencer," she explained. Of course she was. "How many followers?" 12,000 on one platform, 8,000 on another. I nodded sincerely. "And how much money does that generate monthly?" Her confidence dipped slightly. "Well, it's building up." "So, nothing. You make nothing." I looked to Leonard. "Brother, you divorced one rich digger and married another. That is either extremely awful luck or lousy judgment." Leonard's cheeks turned hot. "Don't talk to my wife that way. Your wife just told me I should give you my money because family helps family, while admitting she has no idea or cares about our history. She referred to my accomplishment as luck and stated that I had not worked hard for it. But I'm the bad guy since I pointed out that she's a social media influencer with no salary instructing me how to spend my money." Vanessa crossed her arms. "I'm just saying, if I had millions and my family needed help." "You'd do what?" I interrupted. "You'd give it away to people who treated you like garbage for 10 years? Vanessa, tell me how much money you've given Leonard since you married him." "That's different." "What is the difference?" "You married him knowing he was struggling financially after his divorce. What have you done to help solve such problems besides telling others to pay?" The quiet was deafening. Vanessa had no response because there was none, but she was not finished. "Do you know what your problem is, Albert? You're selfish. You have a lot of money and are hoarding it instead of assisting your family. Leonard told me you were close when you were youngsters." "Did Leonard tell you we used to be close?" I looked at my brother. "Is that the tale you've been telling people? That we grew up together yet eventually drifted apart?" Leonard could not meet my gaze. "Albert, we were close when we were kids." "We weren't close, Leonard. You were the golden boy who did everything correctly. And I was the letdown who took the wrong way. That has been the dynamic since day one. And you never did anything to change this. Even when we were youngsters, you agreed with everyone else and treated me as if I were somehow inferior to you." The figures don't lie. I took out my phone and scanned through my contacts. "Vanessa, you said I was lucky with building projects. Allow me to show you what luck looks like." I opened my banking app and pointed the screen to them. "This is my business account. Current balance is in the millions. That's only the checking account. Does not include investments, retirement funds, or property values." Their eyes widened as they looked at the number on the screen. "I spent a lot of money to build this house. I paid with cash. The workshop is outfitted with equipment worth hundreds of thousands. The trucks outside, the F-350 dually, were quite expensive. When I complete restoring the old car, it will be worth 6 figures, and that is just the toys. My investing portfolio is excellent. I have numerous rental homes with substantial equity. Last year my company achieved multi-million-dollar revenue, and I personally earned a significant income after taxes." The silence was tremendous. They knew I was succeeding, but witnessing the actual extent stunned them. "So when you say I got lucky, Vanessa, you mean that I worked long hours for 15 years, established a reputation for quality that demanded a premium price, and made prudent financial choices. But fine. We'll call it luck." Leonard stared at his hands as he delivered the final truth bomb. "Albert, I had no idea." "I have no idea what? Was your brother successful? That I had accomplished something substantial while you were playing office politics and getting taken to the cleaners? I've attempted to tell you about my success for years. You just weren't listening." I returned to the window and looked out at my land. You know what the saddest part is? I would have discussed anything with family members who genuinely cared for me. When I was building this house, I had visions of hosting family cookouts, having nieces and nephews visit for the summer, and being the successful uncle who helped with school funding. Turning back to face them, I said, "But that needed having a family who recognized me as more than a disappointment." Instead, I developed relationships with people who valued what I was creating. I assisted my foreman in purchasing his own home. My office manager. I'm paying for her daughter's schooling. My concrete crew leader. I co-signed his company loan when the bank refused to approve him. Grandmother Margaret dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Albert, we made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed briefly. Grandmother, you told people you were embarrassed to have a grandson who worked with his hands like an ordinary laborer. Laura informed her neighbors that I was the family failure who would never amount to anything. Leonard didn't even ask me to his first wedding, so I took out my phone again. You want to know about mistakes? Let me show you what you truly lost. I scrolled through my photos and found the ones I was looking for. This is the children's hospital wing I donated to build last year. It's named after our great-grandfather, who worked in construction his entire life to support his family. Their faces turned pale as they comprehended the ramifications. This is the scholarship fund I established at the community college each year for students who wish to learn a skill rather than go to four-year colleges. And this, I showed them another photo, is the shelter I helped build and furnish. I provided all labor and supplies. I was especially proud of the hospital's children's wing, which had been operating in a converted basement for years with poor lighting and outdated equipment. My donation helped fund a complete renovation that included child-friendly design, natural lighting, and a place for families to stay during treatment. Every year, I selected students who wanted to learn a craft but couldn't afford the necessary tools and materials. The scholarship covered everything, including tuition, books, tools, work boots, and safety equipment, and some of my winners now work full-time for my company. Aunt Laura was in tears now. Albert, we didn't know. You had no idea since you had never asked. You were too busy looking down at me to realize what I was actually doing. I placed my phone away and looked at each of them individually. But here's the point. I did not perform those things to gain notoriety or to prove anything to you. I did them because it was the correct thing to do. Lucas, who had been quiet, eventually spoke up. Albert, is there any way we can make this right? I understand we messed up, but family should mean something. I watched his expression for a long time. He appeared to realize the gravity of what they'd done more than anyone else. Lucas, family means something. It entails being there for one another during good times and bad. It entails praising each other's accomplishments without jealousy. It means having each other's backs when the world attempts to tear you down. I paused, letting that sink in. Tell me, when did any of you ever do that for me? He couldn't respond because the answer was never. Do you want to know what family means to me now? When the flood struck East Texas last month, I took 6 of my employees and 4 vehicles to assist with cleanup and repairs. We worked for free for 2 weeks to help people restore their homes. Those people are now my family. We support each other because we want to, not because we share DNA. We helped over 50 families get back on their feet by clearing debris, tarping roofs, and assisting families in salvaging what they could from flood-damaged homes. My crew volunteered their time, and I covered all of the expenses, including fuel, equipment, meals, and hotel rooms. I walked up to the front door and opened it wide. That's what family looks like. Now go out of my house. Leonard came to a halt and turned around as they passed me, each looking defeated and humiliated. Albert, I know I don't deserve it, but if you ever change your mind about giving us another chance. I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. The golden kid who had had everything handed to him and squandered it through stupid judgments and bad taste in companions. The man who had stood by while his family treated me like nothing for a decade. Leonard, do you want another chance? Here's what it looks like. You solve your own problems without seeking assistance from others. You demonstrate your ability to be self-sufficient. Most importantly, you learn to treat people with dignity, rather than viewing them as either useful or disposable. He gave a slow nod, his eyes wet. What if I do all that? Then maybe we can talk about being brothers. But not until then. As they drove away, I stood in my doorway, watching their taillights vanish down my private road. For the first time in 10 years, I felt fully free of their expectations and judgments. My phone vibrated with a text from my foreman. Boss, we have a poker game tonight. Are you in? I smiled and replied back. Absolutely. Family supper, correct? You know it, boss. I secured the door and walked back to my garage where the Chevelle was waiting. Some things are worth preserving, while others are better left in the past. My mother pressured me to donate to the sister who slept with my boyfriend, but testing revealed the explosive affair she hid for decades. My sister Serafina has been suffering from kidney failure for almost 6 months. At first she was doing okay. She was undergoing treatments and holding on while waiting for a kidney transplant. However, things have recently gotten worse. Her health has deteriorated, and doctors now believe she requires a kidney transplant very away. Because of this, my mother has asked me to be tested to determine whether I am a match for Serafina so that I can give one of my kidneys to her. To be honest, I'm unsure how I feel about it. I have a lot of conflicting feelings about this. Serafina and I do not have a close relationship. Actually, we haven't had a relationship in several years. Growing up, she made my life difficult. It seemed like she went out of her way to make me unhappy. In school, I was frequently bullied by other students. I was little for my age, rather nerdy, and struggled with my weight. All of this made me a prime target for bullies. They used to tease me about my appearance, call me terrible names, and steal my lunch money on a regular basis. There were even a few instances where things were violent and I ended up getting banged up. That's when my teacher intervened and informed my parents about the situation. My folks thought Serafina could help me. Serafina is only a year older than myself, and we attended the same school, so she was there for all of those difficult years when I was bullied. But instead of standing up for me or trying to help, she did nothing to improve the situation. In reality, she made matters worse. She actually sided with my bullies. Serafina would tell them personal facts about me, such as what I wore at home and how few friends I had. She ensured that they had all of the ammunition they needed to make me feel even smaller than I already did. She would occasionally join forces with my bullies to gang up on me over lunchtime. They'd laugh at me, mock me, and keep pressing until I cried. I felt totally alone. I couldn't understand why my own sister, who was supposed to have my back, was so harsh. When I told our parents that Serafina was bullying me, she pretended to be completely innocent. She told them I was lying, and that I was either confused or overreacting. Despite my objections, my parents believed her. They encouraged me to stop blaming her and instead ignore the real bullies. It was extremely frustrating since, despite my own sister bullying me, no one believed me. Nobody saw what I was going through. When I finished and went to college, I expected my life to improve because my bullies were no longer there. I hoped to start afresh, and for a while, I did. College seemed like a fresh start. I even met someone special. Damien, my first boyfriend. He was pleasant and polite, and I adored him. I brought him home to meet my family, and my parents also liked him. However, Serafina's reaction was different. Serafina seems overjoyed to meet him, rather than simply courteous. Throughout dinner she flirted with my boyfriend in ways that made me uncomfortable. She made improper comments about his appearance, pointing out his large biceps and muscular chest as if it were a joke. At first I attempted to dismiss it, assuming she didn't recognize how she was acting. But as time went on, it became evident that she didn't care. She was plainly interested in my partner and was attempting to grab his attention. To make matters worse, I later discovered that Serafina had tracked Damien down on social media without my knowledge and sent him messages expressing her want to meet up with him. She did it behind my back. When I learned about it, I immediately confronted Damien. I completely expected him to block her and prevent any contact with her. He assured me that he had done exactly that, and I believed him. I trusted him. But as time went on, I noticed that he got increasingly aloof and secretive with me. What I didn't realize at the time was that Damien had not blocked Serafina at all. Instead, he began meeting up with my sister in private. They weren't simply speaking, they were also having regular sexual encounters. I had no idea about any of this until one of my close friends from college saw them together. She saw Damien and Serafina in his car, acting like a couple, and immediately came to tell me what she had seen. Hearing the facts felt like a strike to the belly. For months, I got the impression that something was awry. I couldn't describe it, but I got a gut feeling Damien wasn't being truthful with me. When I brought it up, however, he would gaslight me. He'd call me insane for being suspicious and say I was dreaming things. He made me feel like my uncertainties were hurting our relationship. But as my pal confirmed everything, I understood my instincts were correct all along. Damien had cheated on me. The most painful part was that, of all the people he could have betrayed me with, it was my own sister. As you may guess, when I met Serafina, everything exploded. We had a big fight, and I informed her how she had practically crossed the line by becoming connected with Damien. How could she be so desperate to get engaged with the guy I was seeing? However, Serafina exhibited no remorse. None. She doubled down and boasted about her accomplishments. She really boasted about sleeping with Damien before me, as if it were some sort of accomplishment for her. There was no apology from her end. This is why I raised the subject with our parents. I told them everything. How upset I was, How badly Serafina had hurt me, and how this was about more than simply Damien. It was about her betrayal as my sister. My father was appalled and plainly saddened by what he heard. But my mother's reaction was different. She said she didn't believe me and insisted on talking to Serafina and hearing the whole story before deciding who to support. Her response startled me. What kind of story could there possibly be? The facts were plain. My sister had sex with my boyfriend. What else did they need to know? I felt entirely unsupported and invalidated, as if my feelings and pain were irrelevant. Even when my mother spoke with Serafina, she supported my sister over me. She told me that Serafina claimed to be in love with Damien and that the only reason she did what she did was because she believed Damien was the right person for her. I couldn't believe what I heard. I sneered, telling my mother how stupid that excuse sounded. How could Serafina possibly justify her conduct in this manner? But my mother's remark startled me even more. Instead of addressing my agony, she responded, "Well, maybe this guy wasn't meant for you. Maybe he and your sister would be happier with each other. I mean, he was too good looking for you anyway. Next time, settle for someone who's more on your level. Then maybe he won't cheat on you." I was taken aback. It wasn't only that she backed Serafina, it felt like she was blatantly blaming me for being cheated on, as if I had brought it on myself simply by dating someone attractive. Was she truly implying I didn't deserve to be with someone handsome? Should I have settled for someone less attractive to prevent being hurt? Until that point, I knew my mother preferred Serafina. There were hints over the years that Serafina was receiving more praise, attention, and understanding. However, I had always convinced myself that my mother still loved me in her own way. Deep down, I hoped that she hadn't completely overlooked me. But after that chat, it was as if a switch flipped. I understood how mistaken I had been. My mother's statements made it plain that she loved my sister more than me. To his credit, my father chastised Serafina little for what she had done, but it was insufficient to make a significant difference. Despite his initial outrage, he ultimately supported my sister. My parents seemed more inclined to forgive Serafina's betrayal than to defend me. Their reactions made me feel insignificant, unimportant, and unsupported. So, after everything had transpired, I decided to cut off all three of them: Serafina, my mother, and my father. I informed my parents that Serafina may have my ex because, in my opinion, they both were garbage and deserved to be together. I also made it obvious to my parents that by siding with Serafina, they had demonstrated how little they respected me. Their acts and words made it impossible for me to trust or feel loved by them again. I informed them that I was done with all of them. My parents attempted to persuade me otherwise, but their arguments were ineffective. They didn't put up a battle to retain me in their life, which further strengthened my decision. Since then, I've maintained a distance from my family. I seldom spoke with any of them, except for the occasional update I received from distant relatives with whom I still communicate. I learned a few years ago that Serafina had married my ex. Yes, it was the same ex who had taken from me. I was disgusted that she was still with him and had not found someone better for herself. It also reaffirmed that I had made the correct decision by cutting ties with someone who had brought me so much anguish. Anyway, I now live my own life. I'm married to a beautiful man, and we've created a secure and happy life together. I also have a fantastic job that I am proud of. We are content, and I no longer think about my family. So imagine my astonishment when, early this week, I received a brief email from my mother. She requested me to call her since there was a family emergency. I hesitated at first, but ultimately decided to contact her back. When I did, I learned what the emergency was. It was regarding my sister's current health state. I had already heard about Serafina's kidney failure from several of our family, so the news wasn't particularly shocking. What surprised me, however, was my mother's plea. She asked if I wanted to get tested to determine whether I was a potential kidney match for Serafina. I told my mother that I'd think about it and let her know. I honestly don't want to. But here's the main issue. My paternal grandparents have become involved. They are aware of our family status, and despite my decision to cut off contact with my parents, my grandparents have always been present and supportive. My grandparents say there is no danger in me being tested. They say that if I'm not a match, it's no problem. But if I am a match, I may take my time deciding whether or not to donate my kidney to my sister. Obviously they want to help. But I am quite uneasy with the scenario. I'm concerned that if I'm a match, my family will put additional pressure on me to donate my kidney. I don't want to feel pressured or guilty for doing something I'm unsure about. My grandparents are extremely important to me, and I do not want to risk losing their support and love as a result of this difficult decision. So Reddit, am I the evil person if I choose not to be tested? Update 1. My mother contacted me again, begging me to get tested to see if I might help my sister. This wasn't the first time she'd brought it up, but I couldn't keep ignoring it or giving her ambiguous replies. I decided to be fully honest, so I informed her right away that I was unwilling to do it. I emphasized that I didn't want to get involved with my sister at all, and that was my final decision. I figured being direct might make her back off, or at least give her a clear image of where I stood. But instead of recognizing or respecting my emotions, she pushed harder. She told me she expected me to step up and aid my sister, regardless of how I felt about her. In her eyes, it made no difference what I believed I desired. My sister deserved a chance at life, and it appears that I was the one who had to give it to her. Then she said something that stung. She informed me, "My life isn't worth much anyway." I couldn't believe she was saying that, so I asked her to explain. Her reply was even more upsetting. She told me that Serafina's life is more precious than mine since she has a kid, whilst I do not. She made it apparent that she thought Serafina's status as a mother made her more important than me. My mother seemed to believe that because I didn't have children, my life was less valuable, and that it was my responsibility to do anything I could to assist Serafina survive for the sake of her child. In her mind, my worth was irrelevant. It was all about Serafina and her needs. As if dealing with my mother wasn't difficult enough, my father has now reached out to me. He asked me to be tested and instructed me to do so for him. He stated that Serafina might die without a transplant and cautioned me that if I didn't find out if I was a match, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. His remarks made it plain that he was putting the weight of Serafina's survival and my future feelings on my shoulders, as if I had the ability to change everything and would be making a huge mistake if I refused. Update 2. I was put to the test despite my best judgment. However, before you all turn on me in the comments, I have something really intriguing to share. Despite my doubts and the emotional weight of the situation, I went ahead and took the test just to get everyone off my back. Part of me felt that I was doing it for my grandparents. They had always been there for me, and I didn't want to let them down. But, deep down, I needed some clarity, and I hoped that the test findings would help settle things one way or another. The results came in, and they revealed two startling truths. First and foremost, I was not a suitable match for my sister. That in itself was a relief. I wouldn't have to face the terrible dilemma of donating my kidney to someone who had caused me so much anguish. It felt like I'd been let off the hook for something that had been weighing heavy on my mind. But the second surprise was completely unexpected. My genetic markers did not match my father's. The results revealed that the man I'd always named Dad wasn't my biological father. When I initially read the results, I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath me. I was already coping with the emotional strain of my family's expectations, but now this entirely unexpected bombshell had been placed on me. It clarified so much, all the times I felt like an outsider in my own family. However, it was also heartbreaking. The revelation sent shockwaves through the family, resulting in a whole new level of drama that my mother had definitely not anticipated. My father was devastated. He had no idea I wasn't his biological child, and the betrayal hurt him deeply. He's the type of man who has always prioritized family over anything else, and learning that my mother had kept such a massive secret from him was a shattering blow. I could see the hurt in his eyes. Despite all, he is the one who raised me, gave me his name and identity as his daughter, just to discover that I do not even belong to him. My mother, on the other hand, was taken completely off guard. She had spent so much time urging me to help Serafina that she had obviously not considered the prospect of this coming to light. Now she's scrambling to explain herself and deal with the ramifications. For me, the finding feels like both a betrayal and a bizarre sense of clarity. It clarifies a lot about how I've been handled over the years, but it also raises other doubts. Who is my biological father? Why did my mom keep this from me and my father for so long? Where should I go from here? Did my mother hide this hidden from him too? Could my true father be out there enjoying his life unknowing that he has a daughter, or did he know but choose to stay away? These questions have been rushing through my head non-stop, and they simply add to the craziness of what is going on right now. My paternal grandparents have also learned about the test results, and they are upset. They've always adored me as their granddaughter, and this news has hit them hard. They are demanding answers from my mother, just as my father is. But rather than confronting the matter head-on, my mother has completely shut down. She refuses to speak to anyone about it. When I contacted her directly, looking for clarification, she had the arrogance to imply that the test findings were incorrect. Do you trust her audacity? Despite everything, she continued to deny the undeniable. I told her that the results couldn't be inaccurate, but she insisted on pretending it never happened. Her response had me stunned. She professed to be as horrified as I was after discovering the truth. But her tone made it plain she was attempting to brush everything under the rug. The arrogance of her comments hurt more than I can express. How could she expect me to act as if this life-changing discovery was insignificant? How did she think she could hide the truth and escape the consequences of her actions? It appears that she is more concerned with keeping her image and avoiding accountability than with the agony she has caused in my father, grandparents, and me. Her inability to accept responsibility, her insistence that this is all a mistake that we should simply disregard, exacerbates my hurt and fury toward her. The revelation has flipped my world upside down. I've always felt like an outcast in my family, and now I know why. However, understanding the explanation does not make the pain go away. I will provide an update as soon as I receive further information. Update 3. The issue has only worsened. My dad has chosen to divorce my mother. I never believed my parents' marriage would end, but with everything that has transpired, I can't blame him. He's heartbroken by the truth, betrayed in ways I can't begin to comprehend. His entire existence with my mother, and the family they created, has been based on falsehoods. It's heartbreaking to realize that this is the end of something that was once a source of trust and affection for him. My mother, after days of pressure from my father, grandparents, and the rest of the family, finally gave in and told us all the truth. I'm not sure if it was guilt, the weight of continual probing, or simply the inevitable truth catching up with her, but she eventually spoke up. It turns out she had an affair with her personal trainer shortly before becoming pregnant with me. She'd been seeing him behind my father's back. The affair lasted only a few weeks. My mother ended it, confident that no one would ever find out. But when she became pregnant with me, she never considered whether I was genuinely my father's child. She just assumed I was. After I was born, she never checked. There were no tests or questions, simply the assumption that everything was good. My mother felt I was her and my father's child, so she went on with her life. But the truth is that I wasn't. My entire life, all the events I thought marked my relationship with her and with my father, now feel like a lie. She never questioned the notion that I was not my father's child. Instead of admitting her error, she hid it for decades in the hope that it would never be discovered. The way things has played out has been quite strange. My mother was the one who urged me to be tested for my sister, and now everything has come crumbling down around her. She caused her own tragedy by lying, having an affair, and keeping secrets. None of this would have happened if she hadn't kept on testing me and pushed me to help Serafina. But I guess God intended me to learn the truth about this. I am pleased I was tested now. Mom is dealing with the aftermath from it all, and she deserves it. My father is heartbroken. My grandparents are outraged at Mom. They all feel deceived and want nothing to do with her anymore. Even my maternal grandparents, with whom I have always had a distant relationship, feel ashamed of what my mother did. They can't believe she's kept such a huge secret from us for so long. Since Mom's revelation, everyone around me, who had never truly cared about me before, has developed a strong sympathy for me. Even distant cousins with whom I hadn't spoken in years have contacted me to check in. It's bizarre, almost as if they're all attempting to compensate for years of indifference or avoidance. But while their sympathy is appreciated, it does not alter the fact that my life has been utterly turned upside down. My mom has lost everything. My father has kicked her out of the house and she now lives in a motel. She's contacted me several times, asking for money and other assistance, but I can't bring myself to give her much. I despise her for hiding things from me. It's as if the more I think about all she's done, the harder it is to have pity for her. My father is currently speaking with a lawyer about the divorce process. I can't imagine what it must be like for him. He's a man who has always prioritized family above everything else. And yet here he is, cleaning up the pieces of a life shattered by my mother's actions. There is a strong probability that my mother will not receive alimony due to her betrayal. No family, no money, and no support. It is almost poetic justice. Mom is reaping the repercussions of her decisions. And while that may sound harsh, I don't have much pity for her at this point. Now, to my sister's situation. She clearly still needs a kidney. My parents are not suitable candidates for donation owing to their own health difficulties, and her time period is shortening. After everything that had happened, I felt the desire to visit her. With all of the drama surrounding my mother's infidelity and the ramifications in our family, I wasn't sure how much time Serafina had left. I needed to go see her, even if it was just to say goodbye. When I saw her, I was shocked by how frail and exhausted she appeared. Her situation was plainly affecting her physically and mentally. Serafina startled me by apologizing for our past, which I never expected from her. She seems genuinely surprised by the truth of our mother's affair. We both agreed that Mom's insistence on getting me to take the test was ridiculous. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed between me and Serafina, as if she hadn't bullied me, and we truly enjoyed spending time together. We talked for a few minutes, but I couldn't stay long. Serafina wanted me to meet her kid and ex, who were on their way to see her, but I knew I wasn't prepared to face them, particularly my ex. I still needed time to comprehend everything. The emotions were simply too much for me to bear. I feel a lot better about Serafina after that talk. I no longer harbor any hatred toward her. Despite our history, despite everything that has transpired, I sincerely hope that she and her family will make it through this. I want her to find peace and obtain the help she requires. Update number 4. It's been 3 months since I last gave you an update on all that has happened. Much has changed. First and foremost, my parents are now officially divorced. My father has been focusing on reconstructing his life, while my mother has been attempting to pull things together in her own manner. Though it is evident that she has lost so much, her family, her credibility, and her sense of security. She still lives alone and has been virtually abandoned by the rest of the family. She tried to contact me several times, but I blocked her. I don't care what she does anymore. I've realized that I need to go on with my life, regardless of what happened to hers. Serafina's wonderful news is that she has discovered a kidney match. Everyone, including myself, is relieved that she will finally get the treatment she requires. She's gone through a lot, and I know this transplant will give her a new opportunity in life. I am not sure if we will ever be close again, but I'm happy for her and hope she recovers well. I've also accepted that I will never know my biological father. My mother has refused to give up his name, and I am no longer concerned. Initially, it bothered me. The not knowing, the wondering who he was, if he knew anything about me, and how my life would have been different if he had been there. But now I know it doesn't matter. The answers aren't coming, and I've realized that it's fine to leave some questions unsolved. I can't spend my life chasing someone who isn't in my life right now. My hubby has been my rock throughout this. He helped me in ways I never thought possible. Throughout every emotional breakdown, he stood by my side, giving me strength I didn't know I possessed. Slowly, I've understood that I don't need to look for my biological father to feel complete. I have a fantastic life now, full of love and pleasure. My marriage, my work, and the life we're creating together provide all I need. I don't want to think about the past or let it hold me back anymore.